Chapter 737. Lilac Evans. After a long debate in his office, Professor Dumbledore finally pronounced his decision. From this moment on, Lily's public identity will be Lilac Evans, Harry's aunt and the third daughter of the Evans family. Lily bristled. Why does it still have to be a flower name? But all of Harry's aunts were named after flowers, Dumbledore pointed out. Petunia means morning glory, Lily means Lely, so Lilac is perfectly in keeping with the tradition. Harry, clutching both Lily's and Snape's arms, looked up anxiously. Does this mean Mother will stay at Hogwarts? Before Lily could answer, Professor McGonagall peered into the room. Lily, your transfiguration timetable hasn't been postponed, has it? Lily shook her head. No, Professor. Why do you ask? McGonagall gave a relieved nod. I need an assistant for my transfiguration classes this term. I teach all 7 years, and although I've only 2 small groups in the 6th and 7th years, mostly self-directed study, the schedule is still overwhelming. Lily hesitated, then smiled. I'd be honored. Severus Snape, standing nearby, cleared his throat. Professor, my potions class could use an assistant as well, he added, biting his lip. The younger students are manageable, but my schedule, and their curiosity, leaves little room for error. McGonagall lifted an eyebrow in amusement. Very well, it seems our Lilac Evans will be pulling double duty. She glanced at both Lily and Snape. Between the two of you, Hogwarts is in excellent hands. Harry beamed. Aunt Lilac, even if secret to the wider world, would still be right here at the school with him. Professor Snape stepped forward, voice low and steady. I will also need an assistant. Sirius Black, having already shrugged free of his restraints, let out a harsh laugh. Your potions class is the toughest in the 6th year Enimity curriculum. Unless a student earns an O outstanding, they're barred from the exam entirely. And your marks? Well, everyone knows you're the strictest professor in the castle. For the first time, Snape's pale features softened. I've realized my grading may have been overly harsh. To protect the dreams of those who must master potions, especially Auror candidates, I will now admit 6th-year students who earn an E exceeds expectations. Under exceptional circumstances, I may even allow a few with a P pass to continue. His tone carried genuine resolve, as though he truly cared about their futures. Sirius was left momentarily speechless. He turned to Professor Dumbledore, hoping the headmaster would endorse a fairer ruling. Dumbledore's silver brows knit together in thought. The memory of James Potter flickered across his mind, but he quickly set it aside, replacing it with the hopeful faces of students eager to return to the dungeons, measuring powders and brewing dreams of their own. Professor Dumbledore's voice cut through the quiet murmurs of the room. No, Lily, you will remain at Hogwarts as my new potions assistant. Your presence here is bound to raise the potions marks of countless students. Harry nodded, and so did Neville. They both remembered how they had once trembled at the very thought of stepping into Professor Snape's classroom. But now, glancing at Snape, they saw him smiling, apparently oblivious to Dumbledore's thinly veiled sarcasm. His dark eyes gleamed with anticipation. Only a short while ago, Severus had prayed that Lily despise him and keep her distance. Now he yearned to stand beside her at the cauldrons, even if it meant giving extra tuition to pupils he had once deemed unworthy of potions. Lily cleared her throat. Harry, you may go now. Mei Ling will be in my office. I've given you the key. Before he could move, Professor McGonagall's crisp tone stopped him. Harry, a word, please. Dumbledore added with a gentle smile. And you, Harry, just a moment longer. Even Sirius didn't let him slip away. Go on, find Ginny first, lad. Harry's brow shot up. Ginny? Right, Ginny. He turned to his mother, urgency coloring his voice. Mom, aren't you going to see her? She's still at school, isn't she? A swell of confusion struck him. Since Lily's miraculous return, he had scarcely left her side, and now everyone seemed determined to pull him in a dozen different directions. Harry barely had time to register what was happening before he found himself half shoved out of the room. He rubbed his eyes in confusion, clutching the little hand in his own as he headed for Professor McGonagall's study on the 2nd floor. Whatever his mother, or whoever had called this meeting, wanted to discuss, it would have to wait until he settled the child comfortably in Minerva's care. Down below, the remaining members of the Order watched him go. Hagrid broke the silence with a low rumble. Seems Harry's wandered off quite a ways. Professor McGonagall didn't answer with words. Instead, she raised her wand and said, Vera Verto. The surface of the large polished mirror on the wall rippled and blurred, its bright reflection fading into a smoky haze. That should keep Harry from eavesdropping through the mirror world, Minerva observed. Dumbledore nodded gravely, his gaze drifting over Lily, who looked more puzzled by the moment. At last she spoke. Mirror world? Albus, is this why you convened the order meeting? He turned to her, eyebrows raised. You've never heard of it? Lily shook her head, decisive. No. There are enchanted mirrors, Dumbledore explained gently, that serve as windows to a parallel realm. A realm where one could, if they knew how, listen in on our conversations. Minerva exchanged a brief look with him. Lily's expression hardened. You know I gave up the chance to see my daughter-in-law and to spend time with my granddaughter for this meeting, and now you're talking about secret mirror worlds? Dumbledore sighed. I'm afraid what we must tell you goes back several months, long before any of us imagined this danger. He paused, searching her face. Let me begin at the start. Harry's sudden disappearance from the burrow had sent waves of alarm through the wizarding community. As soon as the news reached Hogwarts, most of you here rushed to the burrow in haste. Professor Snape, would you remind us what Harry reported when he finally reappeared? Snape cleared his throat and met Dumbledore's steady gaze. He said he'd been drawn into the mirror world by the Mirror Beast, a creature formed from the same dark magic Voldemort used to create his Horcruxes. In that distorted realm, Harry fought the beast, defeated it, and learned the true location of one of Voldemort's Horcruxes. Sure enough, we later confirmed that the Hufflepuff cup in Bellatrix Lestrange's vault was indeed a Horcrux. Harry destroyed the piece of Voldemort's soul inside it and brought the cup back. The rest, I'm certain, is already well known, so please, spare me the blank stares. A murmur rippled through the assembly, but Lily Evans pressed on. All of that makes sense, but what does it have to do with my question, and where does Riddle come in? Dumbledore held up a gentle hand. One question at a time, Lily. Everything will fall into place in a moment. He paused, letting the tension settle. Then, with a weighty look around the room, he revealed, what you may not realize is that the Resurrection Stone, the very artifact believed to summon the dead, is itself a Horcrux. Its predecessor was the emerald gem set in Marvolo Gaunt's ring, the heirloom of Salazar Slytherin that passed into Tom Riddle's possession. When the ring was destroyed, a fragment of Voldemort's soul clung to the gem's power and was carried over into the stone. In other words, the stone you now hold is every bit as infused with his dark essence as any other Horcrux we have ever encountered. Harry first learned of the Resurrection Stone from the tale of the three brothers in the Tales of Beedle the Bard during his History of Magic lessons. Convinced that it could bring Lily back to life, he confided his plan to me in his very first year at Hogwarts. When he mysteriously vanished from the burrow, he must have entered and defeated two mirror beasts. In doing so, he confirmed the stone's reality, discovered its hidden resting place, mastered the method for destroying Horcrux soul fragments, and unlocked the secret of how to wield the Resurrection Stone itself. I'll explain those particulars in full later. This term, Harry broke his old habit of staying within the castle. Every Sunday, he slipped into Hogsmeade. Today, Easter Sunday, he used the mirror world as a transit point, traveled to the stone's secret sanctuary, and at last succeeded in resurrecting Lily. But what does this have to do with my problem? I asked. Dumbledore's expression grew grave. Everything rests on the mirror world, he said. I suspect that realm is a patchwork of the shattered domains of the gods who were once defeated. So you're saying my son has a profound bond with the hidden kingdom of God, and that he was attacked? What exactly links this mirror world to him? Acknowledgements. A heartfelt thank you to the Cat Pigeon King, Taishi Cornsilk, and all my classmates for your monthly tickets, recommendations, and subscriptions. Chapter 738, Anxious Lily. Lily's heart pounded as she replayed Dumbledore's words in her mind. Her son, Harry, had mastered the mirror world, using it as a portal for instantaneous travel over vast distances. Though this realm might even be the legendary Kingdom of God, a resource any witch or wizard would covet, Lily feared it could taint Harry's destiny. In her eyes, he bore the sacred mark of the Savior, and one day he was meant to ascend as the next god of death. For the good of their family, she believed, Harry must renounce any divine power the mirror world offered. Such restraint was precisely the moral purity demanded of death's steward. She reminded herself, too, that resurrection itself posed no sin. Harry's sole task was to vanquish his fated foe, Voldemort, without straying into wrongdoing. Only then, upon his own death, would he assume the mantle of death. Dumbledore had cautioned that Harry's bond with Voldemort might grant him unnatural longevity, but Lily saw no real threat. The god of death eventually claims any soul that lingers too long among the living, a fate even the greatest wizards cannot escape, as Nicholas Flamel once discovered. And so Lily steeled herself, determined to guide Harry back to his true path before it was too late. Chapter 8. The Shadow of the Mirror Realm. Albus Dumbledore stood by the tall, stained-glass window of his office, the morning light dancing across his silver beard. Across from him, Lily Potter's fingers twisted the edge of her shawl. Anxiety sharpened her usually composed features. "When the moment arrives," Dumbledore began softly, "Harry will take up the mantle that awaits him. But there is a complication we cannot ignore: the Mirror Realm. It is not merely a legend or an echo of our world. It is a tangible legacy of a realm we believed destroyed. Its very existence could lead the death gods to judge Harry unworthy." Lily's eyes widened. "But can't we sever the link completely? If the Mirror Realm still breathes, its defeated forces will gather strength, and those shadows will launch themselves at the death gods. I refuse to let Harry be drawn into that chaos again." Dumbledore raised a gentle hand. "I understand your fears, Lily, but it is not possible to simply cut it off. The Mirror Realm is an exact reflection of our reality, every thought, every soul, even our own. Harry's victory there was, by his own admission, a stroke of luck. In that world, our mirror images hold every advantage of familiarity with their own land. Should we step through, those darker selves would overrun us, seize our bodies, and breach our world. The result would be a catastrophe far worse than maintaining the status quo." Lily's shoulders sagged, but she pressed on. "Harry mastered the power to cross between the two worlds, and even summon the Pluto dragon. Isn't that proof we can control it?" Dumbledore's eyes were kind but grave. "Yes, he wields that power, but it is fragile, tied to the balance between worlds. To force the barrier would risk unleashing horrors that have no counterpart here. Imagine our bodies stolen by cruel doppelgangers, our reality invaded by creatures born of darkness. That would be the true nightmare." Lily fell silent, her resolve wavering beneath the weight of his words. Outside, Hogwarts stirred to life, ignorant of the delicate line that separated their world from the shadows just beyond. "However, if these disturbances really are tied to the gods," Dumbledore murmured, stroking his chin as he pondered the rumor of a deity's return. "Lily, have you ever encountered Kronos in that world?" Lily shook her head. "I haven't seen him myself, but I've met his descendants. The founder of the Hall of Time counts among them. In countless myths, Kronos is the first cause. His so-called death wasn't the work of the god of death. Instead, other gods say he perished when his ambition to reach a higher plane failed." Dumbledore nodded thoughtfully. "It seems he's returning. Harry dreamed of him, appearing in Rotherham Church, South Yorkshire, and halting time at Elf. We investigated afterward and found a residual force so powerful it defies detection. Invisible, intangible, yet unmistakably present. The name Kronos still carries the power of time." Lily's eyes widened. "You mean the mirror world is connected to Kronos as well?" "Great Merlin's beard, if he's truly alive again. Dumbledore, you must understand. When a god walks the earth and you're not one of his believers, you must never speak his name." "Calm down, Lily," Dumbledore replied gently, placing a steadying hand on her shoulder. "We have measures in place. The time-turners are locked away. We've ceased all temporal experimentation until we know more. There's no need for panic, only caution and careful study." Albus Dumbledore sat forward in his high-backed armchair, his gaze gentle as he reached out to steady Lily Potter's trembling hand. "When we speak his name," she murmured, voice tight, "we sense nothing, no prickle of being watched, no oppressive shadow. It's as if he sealed away every trace of himself. He chose to close the channel linking his name to the world." Dumbledore squeezed her hand reassuringly. "Indeed, he has that power, but you must not lose heart." Lily exhaled, a weary smile touching her lips. All right, standing before gods, a mere mortal can only bow her head and accept. But who is Riddle? He sounds tied to Harry, tied to this talk of his immortality. The headmaster's eyes darkened with memory. Professor Riddle is our new Defense Against the Dark Arts teacher at Hogwarts. To grasp who he is, you must first understand Voldemort's chosen path to unending life, the Horcrux. By the time Dumbledore had begun explaining the dreadful nature of Horcruxes to Lily, how a fragment of a wizard's soul is anchored to the mortal world, Harry was already bounding up the staircase toward Gryffindor Tower. The common room was nearly empty. Since the Christmas ball, most students had gone home early for the Easter holidays. Only a handful, Anthony Goldstein and his friends, would trickle back in the next few days. Tonight, Harry found only Ron and Ginny huddled by the hearth. He sank into an armchair, still buzzing from the afternoon's revelations. "You'll never guess who I spoke to," he said, letting his cloak fall to the floor. "Mum," and Dumbledore told her all about Riddle. He's teaching Defense Against the Dark Arts here, and it's all bound up in Voldemort's Horcruxes. Ginny snapped her book shut, eyes wide. You actually saw Mum? And she knows?" Before Harry could answer, Ron sprang to his feet, face ashen. He smoothed a stray lock of hair and tugged at his robe's hem, as if preparing for an audience with Lily herself. "You're telling me Mrs. Potter's been resurrected, right here in the castle?" he blurted. Ginny shot up beside him, equally stunned. Harry couldn't help a rueful grin. After everything he'd just learned, his friend's astonishment felt oddly comforting. Ginny threw her hands up and cut Ron off. "Enough, Ron?" His startled yelp had a strangely soothing effect on her. She paused and looked away, exhaling. "So that was Neville I ran into this morning? I almost kissed him before he darted off." Harry wiped the cold sweat from his brow. "Neville's taken. He and Hannah are very serious. That's precisely why I trusted him to impersonate me." Ron's face fell. "Why not me? I'm your best friend. I know Ginny inside and out. I could have slipped into your role just as well." Harry shook his head. "It isn't about fooling Ginny. It's about fooling everyone. Dumbledore, and possibly Grindelwald. Neville's build is nearly identical to mine, and his natural anti-magic presence makes him almost undetectable." He glanced over at the empty table beside him. "I just realized I never told Neville his part is over. His mission's complete." Harry snatched up a quill and a sheet of parchment, already planning the note he would send to Neville. Paper cranes swirled through the Ravenclaw common room, filling the air with gentle rustling. Harry surveyed them thoughtfully. "Let's see. What should I write? How about, your mission is complete?" With a flick of his wand, the message-bearing parchment folded itself into 1,000 delicate cranes. They flew in a glittering cloud toward the arched window and out into the night. "Perfect," Harry said. "Now Neville will finally have time to take Hannah out on a proper date." "Hannah's in Hogsmeade, too?" Ron's ears perked up. "I heard Susan talking about it. Now, apparently she's been acting odd. Every Sunday she wanders into Hogsmeade, just like me, but she always goes straight to the Hog's Head." Harry frowned, tapping his chin. "The Hog's Head? I know that name. Who runs it?" "Oh, Aberforth Dumbledore. That's right, Albus's brother." "That's got to be it," Ron said, eyes gleaming with excitement. "She's probably training under Aberforth, just like you've been training with Professor Dumbledore every Saturday. Remember how Hannah mentioned she wanted to own a pub someday?" Ginny rolled her eyes. "The Hog's Head? That seedy little tavern? Knowing Ron, he'd be even bolder there than he is at the Three Broomsticks. What on earth could Hannah be learning? Goat herding?" They exchanged amused glances, imagining Hannah trading charms lessons for cow stalls and bleeding goats. But if she was serious about running a bar, it made perfect sense that she'd seek lessons from the most unconventional of teachers, even if it was Aberforth Dumbledore at the Hog's Head. Chapter 739, Dumbledore's Greatness. "Harry, do you know why Dumbledore is so great?" Ginny asked, tilting her head quizzically. Harry paused, studying the grass at his feet. "The chocolate frog card tells you plenty. His breakthroughs in alchemy, the 12 uses he discovered for dragon's blood, even the personal sacrifice he made, ending his relationship to preserve peace in the wizarding world. But none of that, as impressive as it is, explains why I think he's truly great." Ron looked up, hurt and confused. Ginny leaned forward. All right, she said softly. Then why? Harry glanced at both of them. You've heard me mention Aunt Muriel, right? She's my mother's aunt, my great-aunt, really. When I was small, I was pretty shy, and she took to telling me all sorts of family secrets nobody else would touch. He stretched out his legs. The Dumbledores have always been a colorful lot. Take Albus's father, Percival. He delighted in tormenting Muggle children with crude spells and curses. He ended up in Azkaban for it. That scandal forced the family to leave their estate in the fertile fields and settle in Godric's Hollow. Harry smiled wryly. Then there's Aberforth, Albus's younger brother. After a while, he gave up on everything magical except goat-keeping. He's so fond of them that even his Patronus takes the shape of a goat. Ginny's mouth dropped open. Ron's eyes were wide. Harry shook his head, letting out a soft laugh. And yet, from that eccentric, troubled family came the greatest wizard of our age. It wasn't just his talent or his brain. It was his capacity for forgiveness, his fierce loyalty, and above all, his compassion. That's why he's great. The corridor outside the Wizengamot chamber was alive with hushed voices, and the late afternoon sun filtering through stained glass windows. Two ministry clerks, Franklin Aspinwall and Lydia Bloom, had paused beside a carved oak balustrade, leaning in close to exchange gossip. Franklin tapped a scroll against his palm. "Did you see the notices on Dumbledore's record?" he murmured. When he was at Hogwarts, he supposedly spent half his time stirring up duels, wand fights, fist fights, you name it. Lydia folded her arms. "I've heard a different story," she said. "What about his Aunt Hortensia?" "Rumor is she was entangled with Hawklap, enough to break off her own engagement." Franklin shrugged. "That doesn't amount to much. Albus himself was clean, no stains on his name. The only whisper was about his unconventional tastes." "That's simply not true," Lydia replied. "Either you've been misinformed, or someone's twisted the facts. It wasn't Aunt Hortensia carrying on with Hawklap. It was her fiancé. She ended the engagement the instant she discovered his secret meetings. And as for the Hogwarts scuffles, Dumbledore's father only used magic when a group of students tormented Ariana relentlessly. That's why those boys were punished, not because Albus enjoyed a good brawl." Franklin opened his mouth to argue, but a sudden clatter silenced them both. The great doors of the Wizengamot swung open, and Minister for Magic Corbin Fallow entered, his obsidian robes stark against the polished marble. "Enough!" Fallow's voice boomed, echoing off the walls. The assembled deputies snapped to attention. The minister strode to the dais, eyes sweeping the room. "We've grown far too fond of scandal and hearsay," he declared. "This body exists on its record of deeds, not on idle chatter. Tell me, who prevented the Aurors from abandoning their posts for private gain? Who brokered the treaty that ended the Eastern Front War? Who negotiated the stabilization of the galleon's exchange rate with Gringotts and the International Witches' Bank? Who spearheaded the reforms that opened magical trade with India and China? Who led the charge against the fanatical order of the Ashram Saints at St. Berth's Abbey? Who reclaimed the western highlands of Scotland from the roaming giants? Who quelled the Goblin uprising in Flintshire? And above all, who has guaranteed that the Wizengamot remains the supreme legislative authority of the wizarding world?" He paused, letting the magnitude of those questions settle over the silent chamber. Then, without waiting for applause, Minister Fallow returned to his seat. Franklin and Lydia exchanged a glance. Their debate about Dumbledore's past had fallen away, replaced by the weight of the ministry's far-reaching achievements. As the session began, both knew that soon these very halls would wrestle with truths far more consequential than schoolyard rumors, and that the shadows cast by both legend and leadership would not easily fade. Ron leapt to his feet, waving his arms like a conductor. "Who proposed the education to rejuvenate the country plan?" he bellowed. "The answer, of course, is Dumbledore." Ginny ignored him, rolling her eyes as she closed her textbook. "And what about Aberforth?" she asked dryly. Harry frowned, adjusting his glasses. "My aunt would back Aberforth's views too," he admitted. "But really, the key question is, why did Hannah go to Aberforth's to learn dueling in the first place?" Hannah, lounging on the couch, raised an eyebrow. "That was the question?" Before anyone could answer, the portrait hole burst open, and a second Harry stumbled through. Ron barked, "Are you mad? Why do you still look like Harry?" Ginny jumped up, glaring. Seriously, 2 Harrys now? What's happening here? The newcomer sighed and dropped into an armchair. You'll have to ask the real Harry, he said. He must have mismeasured the polyjuice potion, made it extra potent, while the antidote he handed me was only standard strength. So here I am, stuck looking like him. Ron gaped. And you still managed to schedule plans? I was supposed to meet Hannah in Hogsmeade for dinner and a dueling practice session. The faux Harry grinned sheepishly. Exactly. I was meant to rendezvous with her tonight. Unless someone's brewing a stronger antidote, I'd better apparate before I miss dinner altogether. I ended up back at Hogwarts thinking I was Harry, complete with the mess of complications that go with his life. The most ridiculous part? I actually had to face the Dursleys. Harry hadn't gone home for Easter, so I have no idea how he stands with them now, and I certainly didn't plan on Dudley cornering me in the hall and planting one of his famous awkward kisses right on my lips. The Neville-imbued Harry glared fiercely, lips pressed into a tight line like a fuse about to ignite. I've never seen Neville this furious, though, honestly, I think it's Dudley's sudden boldness that set him off more than anything else. Neville's normally as mild-mannered as they come. If he hadn't blown off his date with Hannah, he probably wouldn't be turning beet red like this. Still, watching him struggle to contain his anger has a strangely entertaining side. Wait, Dudley actually kissed you? Ron demanded, mouth hanging open. The moment it registered, he doubled over in laughter until he could barely catch his breath. Harry, you've always been close with Dudley, right? I mean, buddies? He let out another choked giggle, disbelief painted all over his face. I just nodded at Dudley, like it was some secret signal between us. Neville, could you maybe turn away? Ginny stepped in, her voice half laugh, half exasperation. I'd really rather not see my fiancé looking like he's about to explode. She gave Harry a quick squeeze, a little cuddle patch, she called it, to coax the real Harry's energy back to the surface. And just like that, the oddest Easter break in history came to a close. Back at Hogwarts, I'd have to keep up the act of being Harry Potter, gunpowder expressions and all, until I could find a way to set things right. Harry stared at Neville, frustration evident in his eyes. You said that after mastering sword magic, Ryan attained the sword heart, the state where he can pierce someone's very soul and literally fuse the blade with his body. Fine, but how is that supposed to work against Dudley? Won't it just backfire? Neville folded his arms and considered Harry carefully. Your relationship with Dudley is unusual. When he's around you, his emotions run deep and genuine. He can't refuse your requests. And whenever you mention him, there's a hint of nostalgia, even concern in your voice. Yet at any other time, you speak of him like he's your mortal foe. Harry ran a hand through his hair. So, what am I supposed to do? Neville gave a half shrug. Think of it like in Doraemon. Fat Tiger may be a bully, but he's still Nobita's friend in his own rough way. Bonds can be complicated. Harry raised an eyebrow. That's comforting? Neville's expression turned serious. Now, about that antidote. You asked me for something to counter Polyjuice Potion. That potion is pure magic, yes? Your sword magic is built on the principle of unmaking enchantments. The moment your blade cuts into a spell, it unravels it. In essence, the sword becomes part of you, and through you it becomes the perfect counterspell to any magic. Silence hung between them as Harry absorbed the truth. His sword was more than a weapon. It was the ultimate purifier, capable of severing even the strongest of enchantments. Could something have gone wrong? Neville's voice trembled with disbelief. I took the Polyjuice Potion, reshaped my magic to match yours, and now I can't access the sword's power at all? Harry stared, stunned. He raised a cautious eyebrow. What do you mean? Under the watchful eyes of the three of them, Neville shut his eyes. He remained standing in human form, but an otherworldly aura, sharp and silver, began to shimmer around him. His pale skin took on the gleam of a polished blade, slicing through the still air. Then, like hot wax under a flame, his features melted and warped. His hair smoothed and receded back into his scalp, and he shot upward several inches in height. Within seconds, the spell concluded, and Neville stood before them again, dressed in Harry's snug-fitting robe, a full size too small. So, Harry said flatly, Neville, your flop of a date with Hannah has nothing to do with me. Neville whipped out the small handheld mirror he'd brought for the transformation, peering into it like a man possessed. Why wouldn't it? If you hadn't brewed up that extra antidote, I'd have forgotten how to undo this myself. I'd be stuck drinking polyjuice for the rest of my life. Harry cleared his throat. Ahem. Don't you find it odd that you've been so distracted? We were in the middle of an important conversation. Neville blinked, the tension in his shoulders finally slipping away as he realized he'd been so caught up in his own drama that he'd missed the subject at hand. The three of them exchanged knowing glances, and just like that, the real trouble began. This chapter centers on Hannah. Ginny rose to her feet and cleared her throat. Let's switch topics, she announced, smoothly steering the conversation in a new direction. Before we continue, a heartfelt thank you to Fallen Lucifer and all our classmates for your monthly votes, recommendations, and subscriptions. Your support means the world to us. Chapter 268, The Eighth Secret Passage. Hannah? Neville blurted out, cheeks flushing. I nearly forgot. What's she up to now? Ginny grinned. She's been apprenticing at the Hog's Head. You know that's her dream, to run her own pub one day. Neville nodded eagerly. And it's the perfect place. Aberforth Dumbledore himself owns it. He's a stickler for privacy. No one's allowed to mention his famous brother inside the bar. Ginny added with a proud smile. Hannah says he's exactly the mentor she needed. There's only one hitch, Neville said, lowering his voice. She always gets back to Hogwarts around 7 or 8 o'clock at night. Harry frowned. Every night, the passage between Hogsmeade and Hogwarts closes long before then. Filch's patrol at the Iron Gate is strict. Latecomers lose house points without fail. Yet Hannah's record is spotless. How on earth is she slipping in after curfew? Neville's face went pale. He opened his mouth, then shut it again, as if his secret had just been uncovered. Neville sighed, then shrugged. All right, since I can't hide it, I'll tell you. She used a secret passage to get back in. Harry's eyes lit up. Which one? The tunnel under the Honeyduke storeroom? Or the route to the Shrieking Shack? The Marauder's map shows 7 secret ways in and out of Hogwarts. Filch knows 4 of them. 2 are the ones we just named, and there's a third that's collapsed and unusable. That leaves 1 more, right? Neville shook his head. Harry's mouth fell open. No way. You're telling me there's an 8th secret passage? He leaned forward, practically vibrating with excitement. Harry had always assumed his father was the greatest rule-breaker Hogwarts had ever seen, a master of hidden corridors. If anyone knew the castle's secrets, it was James Potter, more than Argus Filch himself. And yet, here was a passage no one had mentioned before. Harry's pulse thundered. He needed to know where it led, to understand where his father had vanished. Neville met his stare with a steady calm. The entrance is on the 8th floor. Opposite the tapestry where Barnabas the Barmy was clubbed by the troll, there's nothing but a blank stretch of wall, Neville said, frowning with concentration. Ron shook his head. No, Neville, I've been right up to it. There's really nothing there. Harry gave Ron an exasperated look. Let Neville finish. Neville took a breath. The tapestry isn't the key. You have to imagine a hidden doorway in that blank wall, then pace the corridor back and forth exactly 3 times. When you do, the door will materialize and lead into a small, empty room. Stay inside that room. Don't leave under any circumstances. After a while, you'll get hungry. That's when a hidden passage swings open in the far wall, and it takes you straight to the Hog's Head. Ron pressed a hand to his rumbling stomach, already picturing roast beef and sausages. So, do I actually have to be hungry? Neville chuckled. Not really. That's just the signal. Once you step through that secret door, you can return to Hogwarts the same way Hannah did, by exiting through the Hog's Head's covert back entrance. Secondly, Neville began, that secret room actually leads directly to the Hog's Head. A hidden passage will open whenever you need to get to the bar, provided you have Aberforth's permission, and his sister's. That's a relief, Ron said, leaning back and letting out a weary sigh. Then he shot Neville a teasing look. Although, you don't need Aberforth's blessing if you simply enter from the Hog's Head side, do you? Harry frowned. His sister? You mean Ariana? She's been dead for years. Neville shook his head. Not the real Ariana, her portrait. It's an extraordinary piece of magic, not just a painting, but a living projection of her thoughts and memories. and it's the only thing that can open the tunnel into Hogwarts if Ariana agrees to it. Ron rubbed his temples. All right, enough magic theory. Where is this room exactly? What makes it so special? Neville's face lit up as though he'd been waiting for the question. Picture a graceful treehouse built high among ancient oaks, with squat wooden beams and portholes like those in a ship's cabin. The walls are etched with faint enchantments that glow softly, and the air inside carries a feint of salt, as if you were standing on a rolling deck. It's the most ingenious bit of architecture I've ever seen. Harry and Ron exchanged intrigued glances. No ordinary secret passage. Then, something far more remarkable lay hidden behind that unassuming door. The doorway shimmered, and the moment I stepped across the threshold, the room seemed to come alive. It had this uncanny way of remembering who entered and what house they belonged to, and then stretching itself to fit them. When only Hannah was here, it was tiny. A single pink hammock hung from the ceiling, Hufflepuff pennants brightening the walls. But as soon as I arrived, the space grew. A bronze eagle appeared amid royal blue drapes, and a second purple hammock swung into place. Dark wood panels lined the windowless hall, giving it a warm, secluded feel. I stared at the two hammocks, bewildered. Why was mine so far from Hannah's? My hammock, Ginny echoed, amusement dancing in her eyes. Why are you asking me? Weren't you the one who decided where to sleep? I didn't decide anything, I protested. I certainly never agreed to my hammock being shoved all the way over there. Am I the only one who doesn't get a say, after you, Harry, Neville, and Draco? Ron's jaw dropped. He opened his mouth to retort, then glanced at Harry, who was already shaking his head with a grin. Come on, Ron, Harry said, his tone light. You were just about to tell us all about the time you tried to sneak lavender into the rose garden at midnight. It didn't go so well, did it? Ron huffed, cheeks flushing. Harry wasn't teasing. Ron's dramatic flair was legendary, and he'd undoubtedly tried, and failed, far more schemes than he'd ever admit. Harry jumped in, trying to smooth over Ron's teasing, but Neville had already checked out the moment Ginny spoke. His face went bright red, and he started poking his fingertips together like a nervous first year. I just thought of it. We could still change our plans. Ginny raised an eyebrow. Oh? Really? Neville shut his eyes, exhaling with reluctant defeat. All right, I'll be straight with you. Hannah and I booked something for the first 2 weeks of Easter break, her grandparents' cottage up in Scotland. But don't get the wrong idea. We've got separate quarters. She's up in the loft hammock. I'm down on the sofa below. It's basically camping, only the walls don't blow down. Harry grinned. So, camping. Yeah, camping with a roof, Ron agreed, and both boys dissolved into laughter. They couldn't help but remember Draco's first visit to the burrow, hauling in that ridiculous little tent and pitching it in the garden. By bedtime, they'd all crammed into Ron's room. Harry, Ron, Draco, and the rest, like it was the entire Gryffindor dormitory. Neville forced a smile, cheeks still pink. See? Nothing scandalous. Ginny tossed him a teasing look, but her eyes were warm. All right, Neville Longbottom, I'll believe camping with walls. Since neither Ron nor Draco had any hope of spending the night with Harry, they settled on the tent instead. To their surprise, the canvas shelter proved enormous, far roomier than the cramped quarters Neville had described. Chapter 269, The Room of Come and Go. When Kate pushed open the door, she froze. The entire chamber, once a bare stone floor, had been transformed into one enormous blue flannel mattress. Clad in her pink pajamas, she gaped at the soft expanse. What in the world? Has someone been using the Room of Come and Go? That's impossible. We've always kept this room for ourselves. There's never been anything in here before. She knelt by the mattress's edge and shook it with both hands. The flannel rippled like water. Then a head popped up. It was Ryan, blinking sleepily. Next came Penello, her cheeks cherry red. She shot Kate a furious glare before sinking back beneath the covers and immediately rustling as she pulled on clothes. Ryan sat up, his pale skin now swathed in a black silk nightshirt that had materialized the moment the air touched him. He stretched out a hand, and a porcelain cup of steaming black tea floated onto his palm. Count yourself lucky we haven't started yet, he murmured, lifting the cup to his lips. If we had, you wouldn't be walking tomorrow, Kate. He took a slow sip, eyebrows arching. Outside, the corridor was quiet, But inside, in the newly furnished room of Come and Go, something unexpected was already underway. Kate tapped the small monitor set into the dormitory wall, the very screen that could stream live images from any corner of Hogwarts. Neville and Amber are planning to use this to travel home for the holidays. Just then, the feed cut to Harry and Ron, exchanging fond smiles. Ugh, Harry and Ron together? That's just disgusting, Ryan muttered, turning away in distaste. The black tea in his cup steamed so forcefully it seemed to hiss. The thought of sharing a dorm with those two gave him the creeps. He felt goosebumps prickle across his arms. Penelo stepped out of the wardrobe, having just changed her clothes, and leveled a knowing look at him. Don't forget, you were the one who planted the idea in Ron's head. Ryan cleared his throat defensively. I only nudged him. If Ron doesn't come to it himself, none of it sticks. Besides, he had to say some harsh words about you, Kate. He did the right thing. He turned back to Kate. Anyway, what were you saying? Aren't you worried you might not be able to walk properly tomorrow? Kate shot him a confident grin. Worried? Please. You know I won't forget, right? Kate unfurled the strange voucher she'd found in the room of requirement. It was an all-expenses-paid, two-person trip to the United States, tomorrow afternoon, April 4th. Her eyes gleamed as she faced Ryan. You promised you'd come with me. Ryan peered at the parchment. Hold on. Travel? I thought this place was only good for random enchantments and rumors of ghosts. He jerked a thumb at the corridor beyond the door. This room's already been used by half the castle. Kate stomped forward, nearly tackling him. A ghost? You're treating me like an idiot. Lion stepped between them, arms crossed. Hermione could answer this in a heartbeat. Just because your brain's on vacation doesn't make you stupid, Ryan. Flustered, Kate sank back onto the quilt, her cheeks flaming. I'm itchy, she mumbled. Ryan sighed and smoothed his hair. Fine, I don't sense any time travel magic, but let's see what happens when we activate it. No sooner had he spoken than the room itself seemed to shiver. Dust motes danced backward in the air, the curtains billowed in reverse, and the small TV in the corner began to rewind its picture. On screen, a new segment rolled back to the moment Neville Longbottom was lamenting his ruined Easter plans. Penelo, watching the screen, raised an amused eyebrow. Or, she said dryly, we could just hit rewind on the TV instead of racing into the past. Kate felt her surroundings warp for a heartbeat, vision blurring, the room growing weightless, then snap back into focus. Despite the fleeting nature of that temporal reversal, the signs were unmistakable. They had just tumbled into the past. Since the jump had been so brief, Ryan hadn't bothered with any temporal safeguards. As a result, an almost tangible pressure pressed in on them, as if an unseen guardian of time was sternly corralling them back onto the proper timeline. Ryan grinned and shrugged. Cool, right? With that, he gave the cork a decisive twist. A satisfying pop echoed through the room, and in an instant, they were anchored again to their original moment. Kate remained face down in the pillow, too embarrassed to look up after Ryan joked about the fishy sea scent lingering in the chamber. Finally, she peeled back the fabric and met his calm gaze. All right, you deserve an explanation, Ryan said softly. This isn't the original arrival chamber. You can't just camp out here legit if it was. I reactivated it myself, using only the old blueprints as a foundation. In fact, that fancy TV on the wall, way beyond anything they had back when Laiku was first built. I upgraded the whole system to handle the time jumps, and, well, it comes with a few side effects, like atmospheric feedback. Kate sat up, smoothing her hair. The room was silent for a moment as she absorbed his words. Then she managed a small, wry smile. So you're telling me we're essentially trespassing in time? Charming. Ryan offered her the bottle. After you, he said. We might as well make ourselves comfortable. Just don't ask what happens if the cork pops again. Together, they settled onto the narrow cot, the soft glow of the high-tech TV casting familiar patterns across the walls. Outside the chamber, the world of Laiku continued oblivious to their midnight sojourn through time. Kate lay frozen beneath the quilt. When she didn't move, Ryan grinned and gave her a playful smack on the backside. What are you doing? He teased. She burrowed deeper into the blankets, peeking out only when he lifted the pillow. Do you really think I'd let you in? Then get out, he replied coolly. Kate hesitated, then edged out of the cover and pressed herself behind Penelo. "That's not fair," she muttered. "When I wore Molly or the others' forms, I didn't care. But this is my own body, and Penelo wasn't around to rescue me." Penelo rubbed her ears in confusion. "Rescue you? Hey, I'm not some superhero." She glanced sideways at Kate's pale face. "Come on, Kate, I didn't say you had to hide forever. You borrowed their shadows before, but you're still you." Kate scowled and crossed her arms. "Fine, I get it." She sighed and dropped her guard. "Speaking of which, I heard someone's taking a trip with Ryan, just the two of them, tomorrow." Penelo arched an eyebrow. "So? What's the big deal?" Kate slipped her arms around Penelo's waist from behind, hugging her tightly. "We only found out recently, but it's a fact. Ryan can be in 2 places at once. Who knows what he's planning?" "I wouldn't be surprised if there's a second Ryan stowed away in the Botan carriage, or sneaking around Fleur's rooms," Kate teased. They sat atop a windswept cliff just beyond the Forbidden Forest, inside a hidden chamber shaped like a gilded galleon. Ryan, crouched beside Fleur to warm her with his body heat, looked up at Kate and Penelope. "Even if you and I ran off on our own adventure," he said softly, "I'd still be right here, by her side." Penelope shook her head. "That's not the point. You left me behind to travel with Ryan. You and I have spent far more time together than he and I ever have. This year I finally got to stay at Hogwarts over the holidays instead of going on another family trip, and now you're planning to abandon me again." Kate rolled her eyes but knew she couldn't argue. It was obvious she'd chosen glamour over loyalty. She jabbed a finger toward the enchanted mirror television hanging on the bulkhead. "Pepe, look, this just came in." Penelope's anger was forgotten in an instant as she turned to the screen. Harry's face filled the mirror's surface. His forehead was creased with worry. In a low, troubled voice, he said, "I feel like I'm wearing my father's green hat. No matter what I do, I can't escape it. They've all filed out of the little room, leaving me, the person it concerns, behind, and they're still jabbering away. Are they really debating Snape's marriage to my mother? On top of that, I've been hit with a nasty bout of diarrhea and can't stop vomiting. I'm praying it's just the sudden chill in the air and not another episode of Yang. I'll finish the rest of the chapter later today, once I'm back on my feet. P.S. A huge thank you to Langua Wang, Yunyang Kanghai, and Yuchi Jin Yin for your monthly tickets, and thanks to everyone else for your recommendations and subscriptions. Chapter 270. Harry Who Doesn't Want to Be Called Harry Snape. The common room fell utterly silent. None of them had ever heard the word cuckold before, yet from Harry's tone and the way he spoke of it, they could guess its meaning. Neville sat frozen in his armchair, his mouth hanging open. Only now did he realize why Harry had asked him to pretend to be, of all people, his father, all in the name of resurrecting his mother. And remarkably, it had worked. "Do you have any proof for what you're saying?" Kingsley Shacklebolt finally broke the hush. "I thought you told us Professor Snape and your mother were just friends." Harry gave a heavy sigh and shook his head. "I only learned the truth not long after I went to live with Sirius. I've been sitting on this ever since, but I can't keep it hidden any longer. Believe me, you'd be just as shocked if you'd seen what I saw." He climbed off the sofa and began pacing. "Can you imagine? Snape and my mother were childhood sweethearts. They met years before Hogwarts. If they hadn't had that terrible falling out, I might never have existed as Harry Potter. I'd probably be Harry Snape right now." His voice cracked on the name, as if it burned him. Murmurs rippled through the room. Ginny looked from Harry to Neville, bewildered. Remus Lupin frowned. Professor McGonagall crossed her arms, trying to steady her expression. Harry pressed on, eyes blazing. "And there's more. Snape's Patronus, it's exactly the same as my mother's. It still is, after all these years. You should have seen her face when she realized it, tears streaming down her cheeks. That's when I knew it wasn't just a friendship ring." A stunned silence followed. Harry's revelation, childhood lovers, a broken romance, a hidden paternity, hung in the air like a thunderclap. No one quite knew how to respond, but one thing was certain, nothing in their world would ever feel the same again. Neville gave Harry a rueful smile. If Professor Snape had actually proposed back when he and Mum were, well, you know, she'd have said yes in a heartbeat. Harry raised an eyebrow, but he didn't. "No," Neville agreed. "Not then. Later on, Mum did become Snape's potions assistant, nothing to do with Lupin. They were in class together every day. I wouldn't be surprised if Snape ends up spending more time with her than with me. Ginny slipped her hand over Harry's. Maybe your mum was just caught up in the moment, she offered softly. I'm a girl. I know how these things go. Remember Colin Creevey from Gryffindor? He once gave me a gift that absolutely broke my heart, but none of that changed how I feel about you. Harry blinked. The same Colin who set up that Harry Potter fan club and tried to photograph me non-stop? Why didn't you tell me about him? He turned to Ron as though uncovering a secret affair. Why didn't you tell me Colin was giving her presents? Ron's face went crimson. He stared at his feet. I didn't think it was important. Harry shifted uncomfortably between Ron and Ginny on the grass. His friend's eyes, soft and distant, reminded him of the Ron he'd seen in that strange dream. After he found out I liked you, Harry, he just gave up, Ron was saying, his voice almost reverent. She was thrilled, really, happy that the boy she liked could be with the person she admired. Ginny, watching them, suddenly flared. She grabbed Ron by the shoulders and shook him. You're Ron Weasley, she snapped, her cheeks flushed. Ron blinked as if waking from a deep sleep. He sprang to his feet, so suddenly that for a moment he looked like a ghost. Then he bounded back to Ginny, exclaiming, I am! Over and over, panic in his eyes. Ginny released him, exasperated. Harry cleared his throat, forcing their attention back to himself. Right, enough about that. I need to figure out how to stop my mother from getting involved with Professor Snape. Neville rolled his eyes and waved a hand. Why would you stop it? Your mom and Snape seem close. My parents were talking about it. They're practically inseparable. They don't want to be apart for a second. Harry's face tightened. You don't understand. My father used dishonorable tricks to win my mother over. Neville frowned. Impossible. Mr. Potter has a sterling reputation. Back when he was a student, people spoke of him like George Weasley, only more famous. Harry's jaw clenched. It's a lot worse than you think. Sirius didn't hesitate to admit it. Honestly, even the Weasley twins are a harmless joke compared to James and me. Later, when Lily asked James to lower Snape, who was still dangling upside down, he muttered, Evans, don't push me. I swear I'll hex you with a poison jinx. Lily chose to forgive him anyway, because he'd promised to change. No more tormenting people on a whim. Well, no more tormenting anyone except Severus Snape. That, at least, James couldn't let go, his lifelong rival in love. He swore he wouldn't attack Snape in front of Lily or spoil any of their dates, but otherwise, as Sirius put it, James was all talk. After all, Snape never passed up a chance to curse James back, especially once he learned James and Lily were dating. Harry sat up straighter, eyes shining. He loved hearing his father and godfather bicker, and he couldn't help copying their voices. But how did Snape ever lose? He demanded. I mean, sure, he's got ginger hair, greasy skin, a hooked nose, and that forever dark scowl. But I bet he was top of his class, right? And he and Mum were childhood friends. Even Neville, listening nearby, found himself leaning ever so slightly toward Snape's side of the argument. Harry took a step back and spat out. It's because he looked down on Muggles and half-bloods. He was fascinated by the dark arts and already running with the Death Eater reserves. Even if Mom hadn't ended things with him, he would have treated her just as poorly. You have to remember, back then, most Slytherins were lining up to join Voldemort's ranks, but there was still a shred of decency. People could have chosen differently. He simply didn't realize how badly his attitude would harm my mother's reputation. If she hadn't been so beautiful, so kind, and top of her class, I swear she'd have been tormented all the time, like Moaning Myrtle. And I wouldn't be surprised if Dad's very first pranks were aimed at those wizards who spoke ill of her. Once he got a taste of how satisfying it was, and how much attention it drew, he doubled down. He even teamed up with the school's own bully, nicknamed Darth Vader, or Fat Tiger, and never looked back. But the final straw came when Snape actually called her a mudblood. That's when she and Severus officially broke up. Afterward, Dad saw his opening. He changed tactics completely, pursued her for 2 years straight, and finally won her heart. As you all know, they were married the moment they graduated. Snape promptly joined the Death Eaters, though he never killed anyone. Instead, He handled their logistics and brewed potions far more advanced than any ordinary master could produce. Professor Snape was an undercover agent from the very beginning, the newspaper boldly declared. Neville frowned. Really? On Harry's left and right, Ron and Ginny pressed closer, one gently patting his shoulder, the other resting her head against his arm. Harry met Neville's skeptical gaze. No, he said quietly. He only admitted being a double agent later. After he realized how fiercely Voldemort wanted to destroy my family, he did it all for my mother. Harry's voice tightened, but he remained silent about the worst betrayal. Snape had been the one to whisper the prophecy to Voldemort. Even unspoken, its consequences were written in blood. Voldemort's 3 previous attempts had already shattered Harry's family, and now the Dark Lord would hunt him again, determined to finish what he'd started. Neville studied him, uncertainty in his eyes. How do you know all this? Those are details only someone on the inside would. I saw it with my own eyes, Harry interrupted. On the glass of the train. He drew in a steadying breath. The Hogwarts Express glide through the night as memories flooded back. The flicker of Snape's Patronus, the secret conversations overheard in hidden compartments, and the moment when Harry realized just how deeply the wounds of the past ran. Beneath the surface of every whispered rumor and newspaper headline lay a truth darker than any potion. Loyalty and betrayal, forever entwined, leaving scars no magic could heal. It looks like only one sentence was included. Could you please provide the full chapter you'd like me to rewrite? That way I can ensure I preserve all plot points, characters, and details while making the text flow naturally in English. Chapter 743, Being a Villain in Vain. Neville blinked. A train? Ron stared at Harry. Hey, you didn't mention a train before. Harry folded his arms, meeting their puzzled looks. Truth is, I'm not even sure it was really a train. He paused, searching for the right words. After I used the resurrection stone, I found myself in that narrow space between life and death. Everywhere was mist, thick, gray fog that swallowed sound and light. Then, out of nowhere, the mist receded, and I was standing on a platform at King's Cross. Neville frowned. But King's Cross is in the living world. It wasn't the King's Cross we know, Harry said. It was more like a projection or a waiting room for souls. When I called out, the train appeared, dark and silent, with a single carriage that glowed faintly. My mother was inside. He paused, swallowing. I got on board, or rather, I was on it the moment it arrived. Harry's voice grew softer. Then it moved. No, I moved it. Back toward the real world. How? Ron asked. Harry shook his head. I don't know. I just willed it forward. And while we traveled, the carriage's windows lit up like mirrors, playing back every moment of her life, from the day she was born to the day she died. Every laugh, every tear, every little detail. He closed his eyes, as if watching it again. By the time the train pulled into the living world, those memories were burned into my mind. And with the last sliver of magic in the resurrection stone, I brought her back. Ron and Neville exchanged astonished glances. Ginny, who'd joined them a moment before, put her hand on Harry's arm. You saw her whole life, she whispered. Up there, in that other world. Harry nodded. In that place, there's no time and no company, just endless stillness. Yet because of that, I think I know her better now than I ever did before. Neville swallowed. I've felt something like that, he said quietly. After mine. Ginny gave a small, understanding smile. We've all had our own glimpses of something beyond, but none quite like this. Harry looked at them, gratitude shining in his eyes. That's why I did it. I couldn't let her stay there forever, alone in the fog. Even if it meant playing the villain for a moment, it was worth it. Silence fell over them as they processed Harry's revelation and the extraordinary lengths he'd gone to for the woman he loved. In that quiet, they understood that sometimes even the darkest magic could be used for the most human of reasons. Chapter 7. Fractures in the Afterlife. Harry paced back and forth across the drawing room of 12 Grimmauld Place, his green eyes stormy. The truth is, in the afterlife, Mum's developed an entirely new social circle. She's met people whose names we only see in history books, legends, even myths. She's not the same woman she was before she died. There's a widening distance between her and Dad. Maybe they've just grown apart after all these years. I have no say over Mum's feelings anymore. Neville Longbottom leaned forward, hands planted firmly on his knees. Why should you? Your mother has been resurrected. She's Mrs. Potter again. Isn't this exactly the fresh start she deserves? Harry stopped pacing. She's my mother. She's still married, and there's no record of a divorce. Their marriage is as legally binding now as it ever was. You can't argue otherwise. Think about it. Suppose you married Hannah and you died before her. Would you expect her to stay single for the rest of her afterlife, or to remarry on your behalf? I just want us to come up with a way to prevent Mum from getting too close to Snape. Neville sprang to his feet, indignation lighting up his face. Are you mad? Life and afterlife aren't chessboards where you move people like pieces. You can't compare marriages to magical contracts. Harry folded his arms stubbornly. I'm not trying to turn it into a contract. I'm just frightened. Snape has a hold on her that James never could. If we don't do something, she'll slip right out of our lives again. Neville's jaw tightened. After a long moment of silence, he crossed his arms too. Fine. But if you think there's a way to fix her feelings, you're going to need a plan that doesn't treat her like some enchanted doll. We find out what she's looking for, what she's missing, and we give it back to her. Make her see why she belongs here, with your father and with us. Harry exhaled slowly, the tension easing a fraction. All right, we start by talking to her. No tricks, no spells, just heart to heart. Neville nodded once, decisively. Exactly, because in the end, the only magic that truly matters is love. In the candlelit hush of the old house, the two friends stood side by side, determined to bridge the gap that had opened up in the heart of their family, one genuine conversation at a time. Crack! A shard of wood flew upward as the high stool Ron sat on exploded into splinters. Ron's eyes widened. That's impressive, he muttered, brandishing his wand over the broken pieces. Reparo. A soft blue glow wrapped around the fragments, but when the light faded, the stool lay in ruins just as before. Harry sighed and stepped forward. When Neville's magic, especially that sword trick, smashes something, it takes more than a simple repair charm. He drew his holly wand, and at its tip, invisible energies flared into a deep red radiance. Reparo, Harry intoned, a brilliant flash of crimson light, and the stool reckoned itself, standing whole and perfect once more. Neville mirrored a swordsman's pose, holding his wand at his side like a blade. An indigo silhouette of a gleaming sword flickered into being, then swung in a swift arc. Crack! Again, the stool split cleanly into 4 pieces. Along each fracture, a pale blue glow lingered, flickering like trapped lightning. Harry's eyes narrowed. He raised his wand and spoke in a cool, steady voice. Reparo! Crack! Reparo! Crack! After the 13th failed attempt, Ginny finally had enough. She burst into the room, her vivid red hair whipping behind her like living flames. A black, bat-shaped shadow flickered across the wall, carrying an almost palpable ferocity. At once, Harry snapped his wand shut, and Neville waved his hand. The tall stool they'd been patching with countless reparos snapped neatly back into one piece. Neville slid onto it in silence. Ginny crossed her arms. That's more than enough, you two. Harry opened his mouth, closed it, then tried again. But we were just joking about someone else's girlfriend? Ginny's eyes flashed. Really, Harry? And Neville, she turned her gaze on him, you had no right to tell Harry not to care about his own mother. Lily Potter was his mum. Under the same circumstances, if it had been your mother's reputation at stake, would you stand by and say, don't worry about it? Harry and Neville both sank their heads, nodding so vigorously their hair bounced. Even Ron, who'd been slouched on the sofa and half forgotten, sat up straight, anxious for Ginny's approval. Seeing their contrite expressions, Ginny softened. She hopped down from where she'd been hovering, perching beside Harry like a small, fiery sparrow. The tension drained away, and the 3 friends settled back into a calm, almost domestic mood, as if they were simply planning dinner. All right, Ginny said, brushing a stray lock of hair from her face. Let's get back to business. Harry, I think our best bet is to force Snape to show his hand himself. Harry nodded, steeling himself for the next step in their plan. The stool sat quietly beneath Neville, fully mended at last, and the real work was only just beginning. Harry realized there was so much more behind Snape's stern facade, sides of him that few, if any, ever saw. And he knew all too well that the person who knows you best can also be the one who hurts you most. Sirius Black, he was sure, already had all of Snape's dirty laundry in hand. "Neville's right," Harry muttered. "I am Mrs. Potter's son. All I have to do is mention a few of these things casually, and she'll see him for oh, he really is. She'd never end up with Snape." Neville gave him an encouraging nod. "You're not lying, Harry. A son's duty is to open his mother's eyes to the true nature of the people around her. Now take a deep breath and let her make her own judgment." Harry swallowed. A few minutes ago, he'd been convinced he had to act immediately, but Neville's calm confidence reminded him to slow down. As he looked at his two best friends, he hesitated. Memories of Snape's unexpected kindness flickered through his mind, tutoring him, defending him in front of the other students. And honestly, he couldn't recall much about James Potter. If James really wasn't the man he thought he was, then was Snape the more fitting father figure after all? Ron caught the worry in Harry's eyes and laid a hand on his shoulder. "Harry, think about it. Snape himself wants your mother to hate him. He's drowning in guilt. Being with Mrs. Potter, seeing the pain he's caused, might be the worst kind of torture for him." Harry exhaled and squared his shoulders. With Ron and Neville at his side, he felt ready to tell his mother the whole truth, whatever it might mean for them all. Harry hesitated for a moment, then thought aloud, "You know, by agreeing to this, I'm actually doing Professor Snape a favor. All his patient teaching won't have been for nothing." He turned to Ginny. "So, what do you think I should do?" Ginny paused, her fingers still entwined with his. She looked up at him, then gave a small shrug. "Ron's an idiot." "Hey," Ron protested from across the room. "I'm your brother. You know, I may be an idiot, but you're an idiot's sister." Ginny just smiled at him before continuing, "But even an idiot can make a good point. Professor Snape may not be planning to start a romance with Mrs. Potter, and she's never said she wants to renounce her late husband. I think you're worrying over nothing. It's far more likely they'll repair their friendship than fall in love. If you're still unsure, the best thing is to do nothing, for now. Just watch how it develops and decide later." Harry exhaled, feeling a weight lift off his shoulders. "You're right. I've been overthinking it." Across the common room, Neville and Ron exchanged glances. Had they really been playing the villains for nothing? Chapter 744, Inheritance of God's Name. Outrageous. Simply outrageous. Did Harry Potter really just quit like that? Kate's cry of indignation joined Neville's and Ron's in the common room. A notorious gossipmonger, Kate had been salivating at the prospect of drama, and now, in her excitement, she barely noticed how her loosely draped pajamas threatened to slip right off. Every fiber of her being craved those juicy headlines plastered on every bulletin board at Hogwarts. Beside her, Ryan watched with arched eyebrows. He often wondered if Kate's attachment to him sprang more from her appetite for sensational tidbits than anything else. Penelo was the same, always ravenous for fresh information, while Fu Rong valued her sculpted physique as much as her star-studded reputation. Ryan cleared his throat and addressed Kate calmly. "Honestly, it doesn't surprise me. Harry's never been the sort to play the villain. His own ethical standards would forbid it." He glanced down at her pajama top, then smiled faintly. "Besides, there's a precedent for this." He recalled the old timeline where Harry and Cho Chang had drifted apart. Everyone said Hermione's fallout with Marietta Edgecombe was to blame, but the real reason was simpler. Harry could never get past the shadow of Cedric Diggory's death. Kate paused mid-tantrum, blinking at Ryan as if seeing him for the first time. The common room fell silent, and for a moment only the crackle of the fireplace broke the stillness. Then Neville nudged Ron, and Ron nudged Kate, urging her to settle down, and Kate, cheeks flushed, finally sank back into her armchair. With that, the tension eased. Hogwarts might never lack for gossip, but tonight's spectacle was over, and somewhere in the corridors, Harry Potter carried on, his conscience intact, his story far from finished. Kate cocked her head. "What else can you show us, Ryan?" Penelo leaned forward, a half-smile playing on his lips. "Yeah, teach us some of that neat magic you learned from Snape. We've seen it through your eyes, the third eye, the trident bursting from your forehead. Then, just like that, the power vanishes, and you're back to being a muggle." Ryan sighed, then pressed his palm against the air. A translucent panel shimmered into view, displaying his core stats. Race demigod, wizard strength, 87, human limit 10. Constitution 78, human limit 10. Magic power 56, human limit 10. Below, his skill list scrolled. Thinking level 6, 87%. Physical transformation, level 6 every 4%. Alchemy 7%. Charms, level 6, 52%. Potions, 24. Transfiguration, level 5, 26%. Magical biology, level 4, 25%. Gunfighting, level 5, 13%. Martial arts, level 5, 46%. Investigation, level 5, 34%. Moon Phantom, 4%. Mind communication, level 4 per 4. Level 3, 2%. The titles Demigod and Wizard glowed in bright gold, setting them apart. Oddly, the panel showed his Moon Phantom skill as only level 3, but in truth, Ryan knew it had already reached level 7, a fact the display refused to acknowledge. Of all the arts preserved by the first generation of wizards, none is more formidable than the Arcana of the First Cause, the very embodiment of God's kingdom within the grand tapestry of myth. Each ounce of progress made in this discipline dwarfs advances in any other form of magic, even the most elaborate body transformation spells. Ryan's own proficiency illustrates this point perfectly. By dedicating himself to relentless study, fueled by a natural talent that rewards hard work, and by mastering the core principles of the art, he has elevated his thinking skill to level 6. In contrast, the levels he's achieved in his other talents reflect both his strategic focus and his personal interests. Take potions, for example. Here, the skill is really a hybrid of classical alchemy and herbalism. Ryan deliberately avoided subjects that wouldn't directly increase his power, preserving only those areas that stoked his curiosity. Were it not for Professor Snape's recent establishment of a medicinal herb garden within the Castle G rounds, Ryan's potion skill would almost certainly still be languishing at level 3, just as it was 2 years ago. My Phantom Body of the Moon skill should have taken a century of relentless training, even with my unique talent, to reach level 2. Yet somehow I'm already at level 3. The reason is simple. The last and most formidable death god is awakening, an entity whose afterlife envelops the entire Earth and verges on level 4 power. It all started with Penello's question, and unwittingly with Lily Evans's slip. She revealed that the afterlife isn't some abstract plane but a god kingdom, a realm that devours the vanquished. Centuries ago, those mighty deities perished in the Great Divine War, yet their kingdoms didn't vanish. They persist as half-formed echoes between existence and oblivion. Kronos is one of them. His very name is both his essence and his domain. I'd held off absorbing Kronos' power because I first needed to track down these lost kingdoms, to unearth their buried names and spectral traces lying between worlds, and above all, to determine whether Death 10 still retained any shred of humanity. I remained cautious until Harry lied for me. Using the wedge carved into Death's own final will, I confirmed the truth at last. Now that I know, there's no turning back. He froze time at the very moment Harry revived Lily Evans. His goal was to find a long-dead god and inherit his legacy. The first deity he unearthed was Vishnu, the preserver of the Hindu Trimurti. Because of his sustaining role in the cosmos, Vishnu was the only one among the dead gods whose essence remained even partially intact. Before them stretched an endless sea of milky white. Upon its surface lay Shesha, the thousand-headed serpent who upholds the world at both its dawn and its dusk. Coiled like a living couch, Shesha supported the lotus that blossomed from Vishnu's navel. Reclining on his side atop this serpentine bed, the god retained all the majesty of his former reign. Vishnu's forearms lay motionless. The Sudarshana chakra, the wondrous discus that once spun with the pulse of creation, had stilled. His other sacred emblems, the conch, the lotus, the mace, had vanished, leaving only the silent promise of power yet to awaken. His skin glowed a serene sapphire blue, draped in royal silks, garlands of flowers, and sacred threads. Precious jewels sparkled at his throat and wrists. A gentle, all-knowing smile played on his lips, and from his very presence radiated an aura of profound freedom and tranquil authority. This was the same Vishnu who, in his 9th incarnation, had walked the earth as Gautama Buddha, waiting in suspended time to bestow his legacy upon the one destined to claim it. In the half-formed cosmos, hymns to the Lord still echo across the empty ocean of milk. Praise Narayana! Praise Narayana! Behold his tranquil grace reclining on the serpent's coil, the supreme sovereign, lotus-nerved and all-powerful, His mercy spans the heavens, upholding every being without thought of self, his skin the hue of storm-laden clouds, peerless in beauty. O lotus-eyed one, auspicious and beloved, yogis who meditate upon you find the Buddha. At the moment Ryan re-entered this realm, the great wheel of vision began to turn again. The ancient indigo face of the cosmic lord shifted into Ryan's own. As he opened his eyes, a lotus blossomed from his navel, and upon its unfolding petals, Brahma, the creator, was reborn. Four-faced and four-armed, each visage bore Ryan's features. Light spilled anew across the boundless ocean of milk. Then from the formless depths emerged the linga, a pillar of unending, fearsome potency. It swelled with the destructive energy of dissolution, and from it came Shiva himself, three-eyed, four-armed, bearing his trident, conch, water-pot, and drum. Thus the divine triad was complete once more. Ryan stood amid the primordial chaos, draped in coarse animal skins and smeared head to toe with sacred ash. A slender crescent moon gleamed upon his brow, and his hair was twisted into horn-like coils, each lock etched with the symbol of the Ganges. Beside him, a new divine spark, Jerosa, flickered into being, born of the same cosmic upheaval that had stripped the names and powers from the old gods one by one. With each fallen deity, their very essence was pulled into Ryan's grasp. But as his power swelled, fate itself threatened to bar him from claiming the inheritance he so desperately sought. On the brink of losing everything, Ryan reached back through the currents of time. He emerged in the distant past and entrusted his legacy to Snape, the keeper of arcane knowledge, ensuring that his claim would endure. Only then could he attempt the greatest of feats, to reenact Vishnu's third avatar, the wild boar Varaha, who lifted the sunken earth from the cosmic ocean. To reshape the world, Ryan had to channel Shiva's fierce energy. He flared open his third eye in blinding light and summoned the trident that cleaves reality itself. Under the force of that divine weapon, the earth trembled and rose, sculpted anew by his will. In that moment, the new incarnation took form, and the world was reborn at the hands of the gods. Chapter 273, God's Priestess. A flood of memories washed over him in an instant. When Ryan finally emerged from the reverie, he found that the Moon Phantom skill had unfolded on his ability panel, mirroring the revelations in his mind. Moon Phantom Evaluation, a power that can reshape all existence, containing within it the cosmic seeds of countless stars. Its true form is the silent moon presiding over creation itself. Possible avatars, by rank, from lowest to highest: Phoenix, Kronos, Vishnu, Ra, Odin, Jehovah. Seeing these legendary names, figures who shake the foundations of magical history and dwell in myth, Penelo gasped in awe. Ryan shook his head. "This level of power isn't right for you," he said. "If you granted it to muggles, they'd lose themselves entirely, and even if you tried to give it to wizards, they'd resist. It would be like cursing their bloodline. On the other hand, creating a simple, controllable humanoid, like Snape's experiments, would be too trivial. However, your Phoenix avatar has real potential. It can evolve along a more balanced path." Penelo's eyes shone with a mixture of relief and excitement. "You've taken on a new mantle?" she whispered. She already sensed that Ryan's mastery over time sprang from the ancient power of Kronos, and now he was claiming an even grander title. All of their secrets lie hidden in the names of those long-dead gods. Although we're both wizards, there's no real difference in our natures. Only those with the proper bloodline can inherit a god's discarded power. Anyone weaker, or even any peer, simply cannot absorb it. Ryan, however, is perfectly compatible from root to tip, so he could have claimed that legacy at any time. He chose not to. He feared that if the kingdom of God's strength suddenly skyrocketed, it would draw the death god's attention. Concealing a lion is one thing, but try hiding an elephant or a whale, and even a single day of exposure is dangerous. Secrecy is Ryan's greatest talent, and the kingdom of God itself is built on discretion, so under the guise of normal growth, they could remain hidden. But tapping into a god's name to force a rapid promotion would produce a power spike too great to mask. The moment his phantom body of the moon erupted, the ripple would be felt by the death god, whose realm, after all, surrounds the entire earth as the afterlife. He would notice. Penelo understood Ryan's careful restraint at once. He wasn't being cautious out of fear of failure, but to keep the entire kingdom of God safely out of the death god's gaze. Ryan pushed his glasses up his nose, a relieved smile crossing his face. Looks like the death's gaze isn't a problem for me anymore. Kate raised an eyebrow. Hold on, there's more than one death's gaze? Actually, there are several, he admitted. The catch is I've become the first cause of multiple new myths. Now, whenever someone casts a spell near me, I feel it like a million mosquitoes buzzing in my ears. Despite the complication, Ryan's grin widened. Kate studied him thoughtfully. But you told me that after we first tapped into the magic magnetic field to download arcane phenomena, every subsequent spell you've cast has drawn solely on your own mana. Why would being the first cause matter? And since most incantations borrow names and phrases from myth, they shouldn't affect you any more than they would any other wizard. She rarely questioned him. Her grasp of magical theory kept their teamwork efficient. Ryan shook his head. That's exactly why you're wrong. Those mythological references aren't just for show. They serve two purposes: making the spells easier for beginners to learn, and allowing casters to borrow a fraction of power from the so-called dead gods. In theory, a wizard's magic is self-generated. In practice, though, every deity besides the god of death has faded into oblivion. He's the only complete divine entity left. If you insist on drawing purely on your own strength, your spells end up significantly weaker than those who tap even a sliver of divine essence. And most wizards don't even realize how dependent they are on these mythic echoes. He paused to let that sink in, then added with a wry grin, Guess I'm not just a mage anymore. I'm a walking legend. Non-standard casting techniques inevitably sacrifice raw power. When a caster abandons the traditional incantations and gestures, they lose the built-in ritual that channels divine energy. At the most basic level, spells and hand motions really just function as passwords, shortcuts for downloading the phenomenon of a given magic effect from the world's ambient magical field, like pulling a file from a vast network drive. That's why true mantras and precise gestures seem redundant once you've memorized the pattern. They remain useful for beginners, but more importantly, they're simplified rituals that tap directly into a god's power. Ryan demonstrated. With a soft snap of his fingers, a tiny spectral wizard materialized, mid-spell, in the palm of his hand. Its body glimmered with shifting blue pixels, the raw program of magic. But overlaid on that was another layer entirely. A golden aura, the unmistakable signature of a deity's might, summoned through the ritual Ryan had subtly woven into his casting technique. The contrast was stark. The blue pixel wizard represented the downloaded template, the magic itself. The golden light was the god's own power, drawn outward from deep within the caster's soul. Penello watched, impressed. He reached out, resting a hand lightly on Ryan's waist. You're not as weak as I thought, he teased, a knowing smile in his voice. Not by a long shot. Ryan yanked his hand free from Penello's, eyes blazing. Even if it's Master Shu's summoning, nothing will happen to my body. No, how could I be so afraid to refuse? The truth is, lowering my power for the call only refines and strengthens it. It's as if Master Shu is practicing magic while simultaneously giving me a lesson in mine. That's why I won't turn him down. And it won't draw on my own reserves. It draws from the flawless realm of the kingdom of God. To that world, what it takes from us here is nothing more than a drop in the ocean. He took a steadying breath, meeting Penello's anxious stare. Trust me. Above them, a vaulted chamber unfolded into the illusion of a star-strewn sky. Thousands of pinpoints of light, star masters born of pure spirit, hovered in cosmic patterns. Their forms drifted apart from the mermaids trapped within the enchanted portrait on the far wall, and from Ryan himself. Yet all three, Star Masters, captive mermaids, and Ryan, felt the hum of the wizard's summoning. It vibrated through the air and into their bones, a distant yet irresistible call. It was the cry of a true deity, the kind of power so rare that even spells derived from Kronos, lord of the Greek pantheon, were scarcely known in today's magical circles. A thrill of anticipation raced through Ryan. He had longed to taste the presence of real godhood, to feel power so vast that mortal worries seemed to vanish. Tonight, that longing might finally be answered. He remembered how the legends of Olympus celebrated immortal might, but how the old Norse sagas portrayed gods who could fall and perish completely. Divine power, he knew, was both infinite and fragile. As he prepared to respond to the call, Ryan steeled himself for whatever lay ahead, ready to discover just how far a single spark of godly magic could carry him. Kate shifted uncomfortably in front of the ancient tome spread across the table. "Why bother with spells drawn from foreign myths?" she asked, her voice low. "They carry so much risk, entanglements, blood curses. Are they really worth it for us modern wizards?" Penelo and Ryan exchanged glances. Penelo raised an eyebrow. "Do those traditions offer any genuine advantage?" Kate cleared her throat. "I mean, could tapping into them make our magic more powerful?" Ryan gave a soft chuckle, and then coughed. "Honestly, you don't need it," he said, leaning forward. "My own bloodline is the greatest boon any of us could ask for. Kate, your study of Jap, Anae's lore effectively made you one of my witches. My power flows through you constantly, as though I'm watching over your every spell. Once you accept that." Before he could finish, the fluorescent lights overhead flickered wildly. At the tip of Kate's wand, a brilliant orb of light blossomed, its radiance so intense it seemed ready to shatter the workshop's windows. The pure white glow crackled with heat. The air around them reeked of ozone and char. "Stop the spell!" Ryan shouted, slapping the table. In an instant, the light imploded into nothingness. Penelo's voice cut through the silence. "Kate Lewinster!" Kate's face went pale. Without hesitation, she dropped to one knee, bowing her head in a formal earth kneel. "I'm sorry," she murmured. "It won't happen again." "Next time you run an experiment, could you at least listen to me first?" Ryan held up a hand, exasperated. "We're in bed. Everything here is flammable." Penelo hesitated, torn between frustration and compassion. She opened her mouth to scold Kate, but the sight of that big-eyed, helpless expression, just like a wide-eyed kitten's, undid her resolve in an instant. It was the same trick Kate always used, and Penelo knew she shouldn't give in. But every single time, her heart melted. This moment proved no different. Chapter 274. Professor Snape is shy. Easter break never lived up to the magic of Christmas. Harry lay in bed, recalling how he and Ginny had shared that special moment under the mistletoe, and wishing this holiday had gone just as well. His mother, recently brought back from beyond, was here, but despite having her by his side, things with Ginny hadn't exactly gone the way he'd hoped. "Harry!" His mother's familiar voice rang out, pulling the covers away. Brilliant morning sunlight slashed across his eyelids, bathing the room in fiery red. He groaned, blinked, and sat up. Through his tangled hair, he saw his mother standing by the hearth, balancing a platter piled high with steaming treacle tarts. Ginny hovered in the doorway, cheeks flushed, hands twisted together. "Breakfast is ready, dear," his mother said, smiling. "Treacle tarts, your favorite. We thought we'd spoil you before you head back." Harry swung his legs over the side of the bed. "Thanks, Mum. You spoil me enough already." Ginny stepped forward, clearing her throat. "Harry, Mum, actually, I should be going. I've got to, make some preparations for Easter with Fleur." His mother nodded encouragingly. "Of course, dear. Don't worry about Harry. We'll make sure he doesn't starve." Once Ginny slipped out, Harry reached for a tart. The sticky sweetness was even better than he remembered. He let its warmth spread through him, grounding him in the present. Back in the Gryffindor dormitory, the corridors were quiet. Anthony and the other sixth years had already gone home. Only Harry, Ron, and Neville remained. Hermione had said she'd be spending Easter with her parents up in the north. Yet Harry couldn't shake a strange feeling. He was certain he'd heard someone else mention Easter plans, someone who shouldn't have been here at all. He glanced at his unpacked trunk. Among his school robes and books, there was no sign of anyone else having stayed behind. Still, the echo of that voice, "I'll be driving Fleur home for Easter," lingered in his mind. If that was true, why had he seen her in the corridor this morning? Harry shook his head. He'd sort it out after breakfast. For now, he was determined to enjoy these precious days with his mother, and maybe finally get some answers about this mysterious extra guest. Harry groaned as sunlight filtered through the dormitory window. For the past few days, his mother had been slipping in and out of his room at dawn, cheerfully delivering breakfast in bed. He hadn't had a chance to sleep past 6 since Easter holiday began, and that stung, because even though last year's blood replacement potion had trained him into an early riser, Easter was supposed to be different, a time for rest, relaxation, and sleeping in. Lily Potter stood by his bedside with a steaming tray. On it lay rows of treacle fruit tarts, their glossy, syrupy tops promising sweetness and delivering an overwhelming cloyingness. Harry shot her a pleading look. "Mom, can't we have something else today?" he ventured, pushing a tart aside. "I love treacle pies as much as the next person, but this is every single morning now." Lily's eyes softened with affection. She reached out and brushed a strand of hair from his forehead. "I missed you so much, Harry," she said warmly. "I wanted to do something special. Don't you think it's a treat to have breakfast in bed? When I was little, my mom would tiptoe in with a tray of warm scones or tea." Ron Weasley, sprawled on the other bed, grabbed a tart with reckless enthusiasm. He chewed thoughtfully, eyes half closed. "My mum insisted we eat in the 3 broomsticks this entire week," he said between mouthfuls. "It's nice here in bed. All you have to do is pick up the crumbs afterward." Harry sighed. Ron might be enjoying the tarts, but Harry's taste buds were begging for mercy. He glanced again at the golden pastry, then shrugged. "All right," he admitted, picking one up. "But tomorrow, can I please have something less syrupy?" Lily beamed. "Absolutely. I'll whip up whatever you like. Porridge, pancakes, proper home ma, bacon and eggs. You name it." Ron snorted a crumb-filled laugh. "You just made Harry's day. And mine too, if those tarts ever run out." Harry managed a small smile. He might not have slept in, but he could count on his mum's cooking and his friend's unfiltered commentary to brighten any early morning. And for now, that was enough. Harry rolled his eyes and headed for the bathroom to freshen up. "Hey, don't you ever brush your teeth?" Ginny shot at Ron, scowling in disgust. As a Weasley, Ron's lax habits were exactly the sort of thing she didn't want her future mother-in-law to see. "Mum says chewing counts as brushing. Why bother with an extra step? A quick swish of your mouth does the same job," Ron replied breezily. With a casual flick of his wand, he tapped his teeth. A pale blue flash lit up his grin. Suddenly, those crooked Weasley teeth looked perfectly white. Lily's jaw dropped. "Is that the silent whitening charm? We only learned that in 6th year." She stepped closer, peering at his dazzling smile. Ron puffed out his chest. "Just figured it out a bit early. Harry'll learn it soon enough, too. And hey, Snape always said I was nothing but a lazy show-off. Guess he was wrong." Ginny rolled her eyes again, but then turned to Lily with a sweet, conspiratorial smile. "I bet you mastered it yourself back in 3rd year, Mrs. Potter. All the professors used to rave about how talented you were." "Me?" Lily blinked, utterly surprised. There was a moment's silence, broken only by the distant echo of running water from the bathroom. Ginny laughed softly and gave her sister-in-law a playful nudge. "Well, care to show us how it's done?" she teased. Lily hesitated for a heartbeat, then let out a small, embarrassed laugh. Might still remember the incantation." She drew her wand, determined to prove herself worthy of the praise. "I learned to do that in my very 1st year." Lily admitted with a modest shrug. "But that's hardly extraordinary. My mother, Sif, was already inventing new spells in her 3rd year at Hogwarts, and my father, James, became an animagus in his 5th. As for me, I just mastered reading, and, if I say so myself, I've always done a decent job with potions." Still, Sif took potion-making techniques and improved them far beyond anything in the standard curriculum. She smiled warmly across the table at her son's fiancée, Ginny, and in that moment, Ginny's curious thoughts were as clear to Lily as a whisper on the wind. Mother-in-law isn't as ordinary as she professes. Most young witches and wizards struggle to control their magic, producing sparks and bangs at the worst possible moments. But Lily had it under perfect command long before Hogwarts. Ginny remembered watching her as a child, Lily sitting on a swing, hands free, drifting high into the air, floating off along the garden path. Plenty of fully trained adult wizards couldn't pull off a stunt like that. It suddenly made sense why Ginny felt so at ease on a broom and had such a knack for Quidditch. The talent, it seemed, came from Lily, not from her father. Just then, Harry bounded into the room, trading his pajama top for a t-shirt and practically bursting with excitement. "Why can't I remember any of that?" he blurted, rubbing his forehead as if he'd woken from a strange dream. Lily's playful smile turned into an admonishing arch of one brow. "Harry, don't tell me you've been peeking through my bedroom window again. Really, how many times has it been now?" For a moment, her expression flickered, just the slightest shadow of irritation, before she brushed it aside. Lily hesitated, her fingertips brushing the edge of the manuscript before her. It wasn't that she had anything improper to conceal from her son. Rather, the book was simply too vivid. Every private moment, every late-night embrace, even the athletic contests she'd shared with James as a young couple, were described in painstaking detail. She worried how much of it Harry might glimpse. "I've always wanted to ask you something," Harry said at last, his voice small. "Mum, what about you and Professor Snape? I mean, did you ever think of being with him?" Harry's cheeks flushed as he met her eyes. "Harry," Lily chided gently, though she couldn't help smiling at his discomfort. Ron and Ginny, who'd been drifting in and out of the room, paused to look on. Ron raised an eyebrow, and Ginny's lips curled into a teasing half-smile. "Severus?" Ginny prodded, unable to conceal her curiosity. Lily's gaze softened as she stared out the window, lost for a moment in the past. "I don't know," she admitted. "Severus is a remarkable man, and James, well, he was more than worthy of my love, both as a partner and a friend. Maybe Severus wasn't quite as polished in my eyes." But she paused, weighing her emotions. Then, with a quiet resolve, she continued, "I would have considered him, yes. If Severus had ever asked me, I doubt I'd have refused. There's something about him that moves me deeply. Yet, Harry, please don't worry, he loves me. He's never stopped loving me. The only thing that holds him back is his guilt. He's convinced that if he hadn't failed me, I might still be here." She turned to Harry, her eyes gentle but earnest. "So yes, I cared for him, perhaps more than I let myself admit at the time. But know this, no matter where my heart might have wandered, James's memory was always there too. And Severus, he's shouldered the blame for far too long." Harry swallowed, caught between relief and newfound respect for the man his mother once called friend. The hush that followed was filled with unspoken understanding, and a promise that their family's story, in all its complexities, would endure. Lily stirred her tea, her fingers tracing the rim of the cup. "I'm afraid he just can't let himself be happy, even when he's with me. Lately he's been avoiding me, too." Harry's eyebrows shot up. "Avoiding you? But you're the new assistant potions master. You work side by side with him every day. He practically begged for that job." Lily gave Harry a gentle ruffle of his hair. "It's not as dramatic as it sounds. He simply refuses to let me into his house. Please don't give me that look, Harry. We've known each other since we were children. After his parents died, I spent more time at his home in Spinner's End than anywhere else. We even broke up in 5th grade, but I still had a room there. Now he acts like I'm a stranger." Ginny glanced over at Ron, who was quietly watching Lily's distressed expression. "Honestly, I get it. Remember how Ron didn't want to show Lavender a photo of his bedroom? He was certain she'd judge him for it. Professor Snape's just shy." Ron managed a small, sympathetic smile. Ginny reached over and squeezed his hand. "You're not alone in this, you know." Chapter 275, Premonition. Lily's green eyes sparkled at the news. Pure Gryffindor through and through, she leaped at Ginny's offer, an excuse to slip into 23 Spinner's End. Ginny barely glanced in Ron's direction, where he stood muttering complaints, and teased, "Really? It's just what careless boys do, leave their wands lying around." With that, Lily made up her mind. But first, she had to reconnect with the friends she'd been apart from for so many years. Severus Snape stared into the shifting depths of the Pensieve, unsettled by the reflections swimming there. His master, Kronos, the ancient god of time, was preparing to step into the world again. Over the centuries, Kronos had courted favor with countless deities, even persuading the second of the 3 Indian gods to grant him the power to forge living avatars of his slaves. He had nothing to lose by revealing himself now, just as he'd once killed Voldemort before a roomful of bewitched onlookers without a second thought. Snape had carefully planned how to introduce his master's mercy and majesty to humankind, yet nothing about the execution was going as he'd foreseen. He'd even anticipated Lily's resurrection, and still, things had gone awry. Oddly enough, no one at Hogwarts seemed to question what had happened. Albus Dumbledore had expressed no curiosity or suspicion over Lily's miraculous return. Not even Harry Potter, who had been quite adamant that his relationship with Lily could not continue, a sentiment he'd first heard from Lily herself, had voiced a single doubt. And that was Snape's greatest miscalculation. He'd counted on shock, on disbelief, on frantic rumor. Instead, life at Hogwarts simply carried on, as though Lily's resurrection were the most natural thing in the world. What Harry didn't realize was that the bond between Snape and Lily sprang from love. In their magical philosophy, love was the greatest force of all, capable of working miracles. For years, in the depths of their hearts, Lily's memory and the magic that bound them had remained unchanged. Severus Snape, marked by an unforgettable love, that had long sensed that the moment of Lily's resurrection was drawing near, just as Grindelwald had foreseen it too. It wasn't the vision itself that troubled Harry, but the fact that its timing was shrouded in uncertainty. He worried silently, for this power ran so deep it transcended every boundary between mortal and divine, life and death. How cruel it must be to love someone so profoundly that you can foresee the very instant they return to life. If his mother ever discovered that glimpse into the future, his father's betrayal would be undeniable. Yet Harry had no time to dwell on it. With only a week left of the Easter holidays, students would soon begin trickling back to Hogwarts. In truth, though, the castle was already buzzing. Gone were the days when every announcement had to be delivered by owl post. News of Lily's impending return spread through every corridor and classroom like wildfire. Easter morning dawned more strangely than Harry had ever known. He'd barely rolled out of bed when a dozen pastel eggs, ones that normally only surfaced at the tail end of the holiday, materialized in his outstretched hands. Before he could puzzle over how they got there, a joyful chorus rang through the corridors. "Happy Easter!" Molly Weasley appeared at the bottom of the grand staircase, beaming as always, and behind her strode nearly every member of the Order of the Phoenix. Even in their robes and cloaks, they looked as though they'd stepped straight out of the pages of the Daily Prophet, where, over the summer, each of them had been heralded as heroes of the wizarding world. "It's so good to see you both," Mrs. Weasley cried, enveloping Harry and his mother in a warm hug. "We thought we'd surprise you. What better time to revisit old Hogwarts?" And just like that, they set off, winding through the echoing halls, up to the astronomy tower, down to the kitchens, and everywhere in between. At every turn, someone bounded up with a question. "Caradoc? 's married now. Is it true he's related to Dumbledore? There were rumors about Dorcas and Benji. Did they ever get together? Fabian and Gideon, how did they fare in that other world? And what of the McKinnons, the Bones family?" Harry found himself swept along, nodding and explaining. He could barely hear his own voice. Every few sentences, he'd catch sight of invisible runes flickering at his shoulders, a muffling spell keeping their conversation secret. In hushed tones, he described the timeline where so many of their friends had fallen, the awful battles, the lost lives, and the strange miracle of having lived through it all himself. By the time they paused in the entrance hall, Mrs. Weasley's eyes were damp with emotion. Harry realized with a start that in their excitement, surprising him, surprising his mother, they'd forgotten the one thing that ought to have mattered most, that this was his story too. They'd cast their spells, shared their news, chronicled every change in the papers, and yet here was the boy who lived, still standing, still listening, and still very much at the center of it all. They may have taken the wizarding world by storm over the summer, but in that smiling, sunlit hall, Harry understood that home would always hold the greatest magic of all. Harry's reputation at Hogwarts was unmatched. He was the cream of the crop, the very top of the wizarding world. With so many celebrated students gathered in one place, the castle, usually home to only a modest number of pupils, suddenly felt uncomfortably cramped. Even Mad-Eye Moody, the grizzled former Auror, whose scarred face and spinning magical eye belonged more in a horror tale than a school corridor, was surrounded by curious onlookers. Lily exhaled in relief. What everyone called a discussion had, in truth, been an interrogation aimed squarely at her. At last, it was over. She never imagined dragging her son into such a storm of questions. Ginny and Ron arrived moments later. Moody's magical eye whirled a full 360 degrees as he surveyed the students milling around. He frowned in surprise. They barely flinched at his presence. In the past, few dared call him Mad-Eye, not because of his fierce reputation, but because his face looked as if it had been carved by knives and axes, and because of that unsettling golden orb in his skull. He hadn't set foot in Hogwarts for some time, and it was clear that everything had changed. They walked toward Hogwarts under unusually admiring stares. He'd grown so used to harsh glances, mockery and rejection as resigned as rotten eggs hurled at a condemned prisoner that this sudden warmth unnerved him. The same faces that once bristled with scorn now burned with worship and awe. A chill ran through his heart, honed long ago in darkness. He feared this poppy-bright sunlight, feared allowing himself to be softened by it, just as Albus had once done, and as so many of their old Auror colleagues had done before they were lost. He startled at the brittle tremor in his own voice. Ever since Caradoc's news, and the even darker rumor that his parents had been killed in retaliation for his work, he'd let down his guard. He'd spoken carelessly of details Albus had ordered kept secret, and worse, he'd basked in the approving gazes he once fled. Now he forced himself to step back, widening the small, admiring circle that had begun to form around Lily. No more distractions, he told himself. He needed to prepare for his first class. After all, it had been over 10 years since he'd last stood at a Hogwarts lectern. "I've got plenty of new potion material to study," Lily said with a playful pout. "Harry, Ginny, Ron, why don't you three show me around for a bit?" She pressed her hands together in thanks toward Moody, and then slipped away into the bustling crowd. The other members of the Order of the Phoenix fell silent, each realizing they'd perhaps been heaping too much pressure on Lily earlier. "Ron, take Mum back up to Gryffindor Tower," Mrs. Weasley added, her cheeks warming. She gave Ron a hearty pat on the shoulder as they followed Lily's directions and melted into the flow of students. Over the Easter break, Colin Creevey decided not to go home. His younger brother, still a year away from arriving at Hogwarts, had received as a Christmas gift the complete set of Triwizard Tournament Champions medals, along with a photograph of the Beauxbatons champion, the captivating Fleur Delacour. Ever since, he'd been pestering Colin for his own copy, just as Colin had photos of Harry Potter to share. But despite scouring every likely spot, Colin hadn't caught a glimpse of Fleur, not near the Beauxbatons carriage, nor anywhere within the Forbidden Forest's guarded borders. By the time he trudged back to the castle today, empty-handed and more than a little disappointed, he could only resign himself to try again another day. Colin rounded a corner and nearly collided with a small group of cloaked figures, members of the Order of the Phoenix. His breath caught when he saw Harry Potter walking alongside them. They were clearly headed for the Gryffindor common room. Before Colin could work up the courage to approach, a sudden jolt of realization stopped him in his tracks. On impulse, he raised his trusty camera and clicked the shutter. "Oh no, I just noticed I never filed my leave request. Here's the situation. I didn't get a chance to revise yesterday, Sunday, while juggling my work schedule, so there won't be an update on Monday. P.S. Special thanks to Stranger Traveler for the support." Chapter 276, Sweet Memories. Alaster, Mad-Eye Moody's wand was already half-drawn when Harry sprang forward to stop him. "Hold on, he's just Colin," Harry said, nodding toward a freckle-faced boy wielding a camera. "He's always taking pictures of me." Ginny smiled. "That's Colin for you. He's the founder and president of the Harry Potter fan club." Moody grunted, holstered his wand, and took a long pull from the flask of brandy at his side. "Always a brat," he muttered, but he fell into step behind the procession, heading up toward the Gryffindor Tower. The curious onlookers followed as well, leaving Colin alone in the corridor, still gripping his camera. Minutes later, at 4:30 p.m., Colin slipped into the empty room on the 5th floor that had just been approved as the official headquarters of the Harry Potter Club. He flopped down on a dusty armchair and rifled through that day's copy of the Daily Prophet. "No," he murmured, flipping pages. "The Parseltongue hero of the Order, Caradoc Dearborn? Not this time. Dorcas Meadows, the witch who nearly defeated you-know-who? Nope. Edgar Bones, second in command of the Order? Nada." Finally, his eyes lit up. He jotted down the headline in his notebook: "Gryffindor twins who light up the darkness, Mr. and Mrs. Potter." Then, clutching his pen, he began crafting the club's next newsletter, eager to share another round of unforgettable Harry Potter memories. Colin withdrew the photograph he'd just taken. Unlike his other pictures, this one wasn't aimed at Harry and his friends. yet along its left edge, shrouded beneath an elegant blue hood, a familiar red-haired profile emerged. He stared in astonishment. It's her. See that beauty mark on her cheek? Exactly the same spot as Lily's. Heart-pounding, he unrolled a fresh sheet of parchment and began to map out his thoughts. First, he drew the photo, marking the hooded figure and labeling her features. Then he sketched the potions master's usual gaunt silhouette, superimposing it with a fresh-faced, neatly dressed young professor. Alongside, he jotted notes. The girl's sudden appearance at Harry's side, the inexplicable favors granted to both Harry and Dudley, her intimate knowledge of the Resurrection Stone. Each clue wove together into a startling pattern. Finally, at the center of his parchment, Colin wrote in bold, "Lily Potter is not dead. She was placed under a sleeping curse and only just awakened." He leaned back and stared at the words. If Lily truly lives, might she have taken Snape's name upon returning? The very thought made his head spin. This secret, if revealed, would upend everything Harry believed about his past. With a tremor in his hand, Colin rolled up the parchment and slipped it into his robes. Some truths, he decided, were too dangerous to share. Colin murmured under his breath, crumpling the photograph and the parchment in one hand while flicking his wand with the other. "Split into pieces," he hissed. At his command, the scraps shattered into tiny bits and, as if summoned by magic, shot straight into the wastebasket beside his desk. Satisfied, Colin didn't notice the faint creak of the cabinet door in the room's dim corner. "Finally, I've found Potter's dirty secret at last," a triumphant voice whispered. From the shadows, Zachary Smith slithered out, half-crouched, all excitement. "It's worth every moment of sneaking around. Curse you, Dudley. Just wait until your precious cousin is exposed." He scuttled forward, on hands and knees, until he reached the wastebasket. With a determined grin, Zachary raised his wand. "Reparo," he commanded, and instantly the shredded photograph and parchment reformed into their original state. "As if a Muggleborn would know better," he scoffed, shaking his head. "Besides the disillusionment charm, the only way to truly destroy evidence is with fire." Zachary rifled through the papers, eyes gleaming at each damning detail. "It's all here. Every scandalous bit. Ha ha ha! You'll regret this, Harry Potter. How dare you steal the title of Champion Fire, Rom the great heir of Hufflepuff, and force your cousin to target me day in, day out? I'll make sure you pay." With that, he tucked the reassembled documents into his robes, plotting his next move. Lily slipped through the shadows of Spinner's End and came to the last house on the street. Severus was surely busy in his office. She had to work quickly. Concentrating, she whispered the password she'd once memorized. Meteor. With a soft click, the enchanted door swung open. She paused in the entryway as a flood of memories overwhelmed her. She was back in the Hogwarts library on a warm, sunlit afternoon, tucked into the quietest corner, safely out of Mrs. Pince's line of sight. There, at a scarred wooden table, sat a younger Severus Snape, his long, greasy black hair glinting in a shaft of light, and across from him, Lily Evans herself. Between them lay a hefty book whose ebony cover caught the sun. How to Protect Your Home from Magical Beasts. Severus had opened the book and slid it toward her. "There are all manner of terrible creatures roaming our world," he had said, eyes bright with excitement. "Fortunately, most of them can't read or speak, so we rely on simple verbal wards to keep family and property safe." He lifted his quill to a blank margin and almost to himself added a correction. "This isn't entirely accurate. If a ward's only defenses are speech and literacy, powerful magic can still tear it down." Now, back in the present, Lily inhaled sharply, steeling herself. She had come here for a reason, and no mere memory, however sweet or sorrowful, would stop her from finishing what she'd begun. Lily traced each line of the manuscript with her finger. "Protective magic has evolved," she read aloud. "They've mastered defenses against beasts and monsters so thoroughly that our children can grow up safely. Of all warding spells, magic locks are the simplest and most effective. The lock uses an incantation known only to the owner. The fewer who know the spell, the stronger the protection." She looked up at Snape, who stood beside her in the dimly lit study. In a voice barely above a whisper, he said, "I've been planning this for some time. We'll make the house at Spider's End our base in the Muggle world. I'll enchant its doors with a magic lock. Its password will be Meteor, after the playground where we first met. Lily furrowed her brow. Isn't that too obvious? Even if the playground is long abandoned, its name is still on record. Anyone who tries every possible incantation and dredges through our memories could eventually guess it. Snape raised a single gloved finger. Hush, say the word, meteor. With a precise flick of his wand, a soft blue light rippled through the air. Snape watched it swirl around them before continuing. I've modified the standard magic lock, he explained. Now the incantation is woven into the sound itself, hidden beneath layers of protective brute force. No one can breach it unless they know exactly how to listen. My wand will remember your voice. Meteor, Lily repeated softly, then looked up at him. What does that do? From now on, unless you tap the door with my wand and speak that password, the lock won't open. Only you can get in. Lily's heart fluttered. She could still see him as he'd looked all those years ago, his pale face alive with color for the first time, those deep black eyes burning like coals as he stared straight at her. She forced herself to breathe. The enchantment's still in place, she murmured, almost to herself. It was as if she'd stepped back over a decade. The small living room around her had not changed, the faded wallpaper and threadbare rug exactly as she remembered. Pulling herself together, she crossed it quickly and climbed the stairs to her old bedroom. At the top she paused before the door. It was painted a patchy bubblegum pink, unevenly applied, tacky, and chipped, just as it had been back then. No breeze of years had even brushed its surface. In the center hung a small, scuffed wooden plaque, the scrawl of her younger self, unmistakably. Without my express permission, no entry allowed, especially Snape, Lily Snape, Evans. She pressed a hand to the wood, closed her eyes for a moment, and whispered, Meteor. Then she reached for the doorknob, confident that this time only she could open it. Chapter 277, Severus Revealed. Lily stood in the threshold of what used to be her own room. Everything about it had changed. Where once her neatly stacked books and simple decor had stood, rows of baby clothes and soft toys now lined the shelves. Green ferns and flowering vines crept along the walls, their leaves brushing the open window that let in the fresh, rain-cooled air. No hint of the familiar stench from the nearby riverbank. She glanced at the one thing that remained exactly as she remembered it, the sturdy, scarlet-draped four-poster bed she and Severus had built together, panel by panel. On its rumpled sheets lay a woman, her belly swollen with pregnancy. The woman's eyelids fluttered open. As I recall, Lily said coolly, Severus isn't allowed in here. The pregnant woman lifted her chin and smirked. I am Severus now. Lily's breath caught. She began, the child is, but the sudden thrum of magic, the unmistakable resonance of her own bloodline, answered the question for her. This woman carried her child. I've been keeping a close eye on that potion you were preparing, Severus continued, smoothing a lock of dark hair that fell free of the headscarf she wore. I even saved a strand of yours. In an instant, Lily understood. Her hair, collected in secret, had been used in this conjuration. She folded her arms, cheeks pink with a mix of anger and embarrassment. Why didn't you go through the proper channels? Severus chuckled softly, one hand pressed to the curve of her belly. Proper channels? When I first learned you were about to be resurrected, I thought I'd lost my mind. She paused, her gaze unblinking. When you told me you'd prepared the potion yourself, I knew you'd do anything to come back, so I took matters into my own hands. Lily swallowed hard, the weight of it all pressing on her chest, her lost love, brought back to life in another woman's body, and now bearing their child. She went to the bed, laid a trembling hand on Severus's shoulder, and let the truth settle between them, bittersweet and irrevocable. This was the only way I knew to draw us closer, she had said that morning, her voice gentle but resolute. Lily's heart tightened. She perched on the edge of the bed, pale light dancing across her silver-green eyes. Then, how long until the baby arrives? Exactly 1 month, the woman replied, reaching for Lily's hand. Lily's face went ashen. But you only discovered this formula last September, 7 months ago. How can the child be due already? Her fingers curled around the woman's, searching for reassurance. Is it premature? A side effect of the potion? The woman shook her head. No. Here, take a look for yourself. She nodded toward the nightstand, which slid open on its own. From inside, A small amber vial floated free and settled into Lily's outstretched palm. Lily turned the vial in her hand, entranced by its warm, inner glow. It pulsed like a living thing. This is unlike any tonic I've ever seen. The vitality in its color, the radiance, it's astonishing. She closed her eyes, inhaling the faint, sweet tang of magic. The air itself seemed to hum, an invisible force weaving through her senses. In an instant, the recipe flashed through her mind. Unicorn blood, amphora resin, yew bark. Swallowing, she met the woman's gaze and understood. This elixir would ensure their child's safe arrival, 1 month from now, full term and strong. Lily's eyes widened as she peered into the vial. Dragon's blood tree resin, and the roots of the tree itself? Professor Arkwright merely inclined his head. They were part of the commission. Lily frowned, studying the glowing liquid. I've never encountered ingredients like these. The magic woven into this potion is astonishing. If I'm not mistaken, it can even extend the drinker's lifespan. It would be wasteful to use such rare materials as mere supplements. She paused, drawing a slow breath. The pieces finally clicked into place. This elixir was designed to accelerate the child's development and preserve the mother's heel, with no lingering drawbacks. Relief washed over her, but it was quickly replaced by suspicion. Surely you didn't raid a pure-blood family's treasury, she said quietly. Even with the generous salary of a potions professor, you couldn't possibly afford dragon's blood resin at market price, let alone the roots. Arkwright's gaze was steady. I took on a special assignment from a very discreet pure-blood household. They're behind the creation of what many would call the world's largest, most complete medicinal garden, though museum is probably more accurate. Every specimen in their collection is meant to be used. Lily stared at him, still processing his words. Such a project would require untold wealth and secrecy, and clearly the means to gather the rarest ingredients in existence. Yet here it was in her hand, a potion born of ambition, power, and the promise of miraculous healing. Under the influence of that vast alchemical array, an intricate fusion of arcane elixirs and potent herbal essences, every time someone consumed one of the compendium tomes, the surrounding magical field was drawn in, and a perfect duplicate materialized almost instantly, as though conjured from nothing. The woman broke the silence with a soft exclamation. Even now, the memory of that medicine garden's splendor would not let her go. It had been a cathedral to every potion master and herbalist, a legendary sanctuary people would surrender their lives to behold. Could I ever visit it? Lily asked, leaning forward. Though still only an apprentice, her eyes gleamed with the wonder Severus's words had stirred. She almost forgot her own child in that moment. Severus Snape shook his head. No, the family who tends that garden is fiercely secretive. They've erased every trace of it from my mind. He spoke truth. Though Lane had once appointed him custodian of that garden, that assignment, and his path to it, had vanished long before Lord Ryan or the Lord God even summoned him. Now he viewed himself merely as a servant of the great Kronos, tasked each day with transcribing his divine instructions. He had no idea that the castle and the medicinal gardens were owned by the Smith family, the very bloodline of Ryan, the man who now housed the consciousness of Kronos. He'd always assumed the estate and its staff were merely clandestine servants of his master. That explains a lot, Lily said, her gaze sharpening. So is that family behind everything at the academy, too? I'm convinced it isn't really you playing the noble patron saint. No one can pull the wool over my eyes. She gave him a sly look, as if savoring every word. And that device you mentioned, the one that spawns extra bodies, is surely their handiwork. Extra? His companion chuckled softly. It's more than just copies. She paused, her lips curving into a knowing smile. Apart from the hair color, this body I'm in now is identical to the one I had when I was young. Broad shoulders, taut muscles, pale skin. Look at me today. Thin, wan, worn. He opened his mouth to respond, then cleared his throat. You're right. The form isn't bound entirely by the original template. It can be tweaked. A faint blush colored his cheeks as he glanced at the waning light of sunset outside the window. It's late. I think I should get some rest. Her last words were practically an eviction notice. Lily rose, brushing invisible dust from her lap. Oh, before you go, what's for dinner tonight? She paused at the door. Don't keep me waiting. With that, she slipped away, leaving him alone in the gathering dusk. "Are you not going to leave?" The woman's voice came out dry and tentative as she half sat up in the bed. "Lie back down. Have you forgotten what you are right now?" Lily's tone brooked no argument. "I still have a body. He can look after me. No, I can manage on my own." A faint blush colored the woman's sallow cheeks. "It's not the same. This is my responsibility." Lily placed a firm hand on the woman's shoulder and stared down at her. "I don't know." "Huh? I don't even know what I will like aunt to eat." The woman's voice was little more than a whisper. "Then I'll decide. You won't complain about my cooking like Harry did." Lily narrowed her eyes as if daring her to protest. "I'm not Harry. I'd love whatever you make, if only it could always be like this." "Always?" Lily lifted an eyebrow. The woman drew in a steadying breath and squared her shoulders. "Yes, I want to always be able to eat your food." "All right, then." Lily turned on her heel, her back to the bed. "Tonight, you're having fried pork chops with chickpeas and mashed potatoes. I'm heading out to pick up groceries. Be right back." With that, she bolted from the room, her footsteps echoing as she raced down the stairs. Left behind, the woman clicked her tongue in annoyance. "Still the same 3 items," she muttered, equal parts mocking and wistful. Inwardly, she whispered a plea. "Master, is this all going according to plan? Have I proven worthy of Lily's favor?" San Diego, USA, a sleek yacht cut through the cobalt waves beneath a brilliant sky. On deck, bathed in sunlight, Ryan stirred. His arm was draped protectively around Kate, who lay against him, enjoying the gentle sway of the boat. He blinked awake, the warm breeze carrying the scent of salt and possibility. Chapter 750, Mobile Phone and the Eye of the Future Report. Kate lay sleeping soundly, but Ryan's body twitched just enough to rouse her. Sensitive as ever, she blinked awake. "Huh?" she murmured, rubbing her eyes. Before she could speak again, Ryan's voice echoed softly in the room. "The progress report on Snape and Lily Evans, I know you've been keen to follow them, has just been updated." He stretched out his hand, and the air around his fingertips shimmered as he drew immaterial magic into focus. 5 alchemical sigils crackled with electric blue energy, one at each fingertip. They drifted together and coalesced into a single burst of light in his palm. In an instant, the yacht's entire information network streamed through Ryan's consciousness. With a subtle gesture, he reorganized the data in his mind, and the yacht itself began to change. From the bow rose a slender metal mast, topped by a circular ring that resembled a Quidditch goal. It sprouted like a new shoot breaking through the earth. Within that ring, sparks arced between its edges, and a dark, glassy crystal the size of a television screen materialized in the center. The image flickered to life, showing Lily Evans and Severus Snape deep in conversation in a dimly lit chamber. "Finally," Ryan said with a grin, turning to Kate. "This is the only interesting thing on the entire trip. That itinerary from the so-called mystery travel agency has been excruciatingly dull." Kate propped herself up on an elbow, eyes glued to the crystal screen as the scene replayed. At last, they had something worth watching, and something worth talking about. "We've done luxury cruises, long-haul flights, even undersea tunnels, yet I'm already bored with all of it." Kate sank onto the plush bench, scrolling her way through gossip on her wandpad. "Honestly," she muttered, "for wizards who've never wandered through a market, let alone seen muggles below the middle class, this is all so exotic, so mysterious." I leaned back and shrugged. "You'd think muggles are endlessly documented on live streams. After all, isn't live streaming a muggle invention? Surely ordinary people can tune in to watch what rich muggles share." Kate shook her head. "Their social media is nowhere near as evolved. Yes, they have computers and live streams, but no pocket-sized magic devices to upload videos on the go. At best, they make phone calls or play Tetris on those bulky mobile phones. As for luxury cruises, most of what they've seen is in the movies." "But you say this future phone can record videos?" Kate's eyes lit up. She even glanced away from Severus, who'd been silently observing them. "Much more than that," I replied. "In time, it becomes absolutely indispensable, far more vital than any form of official ID. You'll need it to pay for things, to keep yourself entertained, even to do your work. Imagine a single device that replaces your purse, your daydreams, and your parchment altogether." Kate leaned forward, excitement finally pushing fatigue from her features. And here I thought the flu network was advanced. She tapped her chin thoughtfully. Show me once we arrive. This phone, video capturing marvel of the Muggle world. I grinned. Soon enough. By then, you'll wonder how wizards ever lived without it. Severus raised a quirked eyebrow but said nothing. Around us, the hum of the undersea tunnel carriage was the only sound, modern magic and Muggle ingenuity racing us toward our next adventure. Without it, you can't even get into shopping malls or restaurants nowadays, Ryan said. As you put it, I'm a bit like a wand, I replied, smirking. Though I'm not nearly as elegant. He shrugged. Think of it as the Muggle wand, your indispensable, inseparable organ in this second life. You can't survive a day in society without it. At his words, a golden clock shimmered into view, floating in midair. Its hands spun furiously, racing forward until the year in the center blinked from whatever it had been to 2022. The clock dissolved, replaced by a swirling gilded vortex. Ryan eached out, and from its depths he plucked a sleek, black rectangle marked by a circle of 4 lenses on the back. Then the vortex winked away, leaving the device suspended in his palm as sparks of alchemy danced across its surface. He offered it to me. It's a Huawei Mate 50, but I've modified it. The language is already set to English. It charges by sunlight, or by magic, if you prefer. Even now, it connects to the internet just like an ordinary phone. And it's more than a phone, it's a full computer. You can run any desktop software, play games. I even installed Warcraft Humans and Orcs, which hit the US on January 15th of this year. I took the device, its cool weight reassuring in my hand. In a world where magic and technology intertwined, this was my new lifeline. Kate stared at the unfamiliar device in her hand. A mobile phone? I'm not from the future. How would I even know the model or the specs? She poked at 2 tiny ridges where buttons might be. Do you press these? The screen stayed dark. Then, with unexpected brilliance, it sprang to life. But the date flashed as today, leaving her more baffled than before. Kate sighed. She had a rough idea of what the internet was, a boundless virtual space for exchanging information, brimming with content posted by strangers around the world. When she'd been told this phone could access the internet, she'd pictured herself logging on to the 2022 network, eager to see whether the wizarding world had finally bridged the gap to the Muggle realm. She'd imagined answers to so many questions. How had Voldemort really fallen? Would Severus Snape's children ever meet Harry Potter's? When would Ginny learn that Mei Ling's mother was Bella? And what might the offspring of the Dark Lord and the Boy Who Lived look like? Would that sly Fleur Delacour ever break Ryan's heart? Did they even have children together? But none of that was happening. The screen glowed, yet there was no sign of Wi-Fi icons or app stores. You're not seriously hoping it's connected to 2022, are you? Ryan teased, noticing her crestfallen expression. He leaned forward, trying to peer into the unresponsive display. Trust me, Kate, it's not that kind of magic. Kate leaned back against the bench, sunlight warming her shoulders through the glass dome. She and Simon had been debating the nature of time for hours, but the conversation still crackled with urgency. The future isn't some fixed script, Simon said, his voice low. It's constantly in flux. If it were truly predetermined, that would mean a supreme power was orchestrating every choice, every life, with no room for rebellion. The very idea is disheartening. Kate tapped the slim smartphone in her hand. Then how does this phone fit in? Simon closed his eyes, as if recalling a long-forgotten memory. The future belongs to the strong. When I activated the temporal vortex, I impressed my will upon the world's trajectory. What emerged was one possible future, born from that choice. She raised an eyebrow. And after you made that choice? He opened his eyes, gaze steady. Conceptually, that future still exists. You could call it the projection of collective hopes and dreams. But the moment I revised my decision, it ceased to be a predetermined outcome and became nothing more than an illusion. Kate exhaled a breath she didn't realize she'd been holding. Relief flooded her features. She pressed a hand to her cheek, picturing the devastation that might have followed if the phone had truly locked the world's destiny in place. Maybe another version of her and Ryan, even their future children, were trapped in that illusory timeline. Outside, the sky brightened to a clear, warming blue. Spring was on its way, but inside the girls' dormitory, Harry's spirits were far from sunny. For days now, she'd arrived at her desk to find the syrup fruit pie her mother left every morning gone. Her mother's gentle knock no longer roused her from sleep. The empty tray and silent hallway only deepened the hollow ache in Harry's chest. Each morning, without that small ritual, made the world feel a little colder, a little less certain than the day before. It wasn't simply that Easter break was ending and Anthony and the others were returning to Hogwarts. Lily's mother had been unmasked by Eyes of the Future, and suddenly her identity was headline news. The front page carried a trio of photos, a then and now shot of Mrs. Potter, and beside it, a surprisingly gaunt, pale Professor Snape, his usual greasy look nowhere to be seen. Above it all ran the question, Lily Potter or Lily Snape? The exposé went on to explain, enthusiastic readers have sent us these 3 revealing images. An anonymous Hogwarts student first noticed that the perpetually disheveled potions master, Severus Snape, has dramatically cleaned himself up. At the same time, a young woman bearing an uncanny resemblance to Lily Potter has been spotted alongside members of the Order of the Phoenix, and she's been seen slipping in and out of the potions classroom on multiple occasions. Insiders also tell us that Professor Snape and Mrs. Potter were friends even before they set foot in Hogwarts, maintaining a close relationship until their 5th year. Of course, Mrs. Potter's husband, James Potter, celebrated hero of the Order, was famous for bullying poor Professor Snape along with his school friends. Interestingly, after the two of them broke up, Lily ended up with James Potter, and that's where the story we all know truly begins. The Potters were slain by the Dark Lord, only for his curse to backfire on him at the hand of the prophesied savior, their son Harry. Knowing that Severus Snape once served undercover among the Death Eaters, one can't help but wonder, did he slip in at the critical moment to save Mrs. Potter? Could the girl in question really be Lily Potter? Chapter 279, or 751, James Deserves Better. The Eye of the Future exposé sent shockwaves through the wizarding world. Overnight, curious witches and wizards of all ages bombarded their parents for Hogwarts gossip. What was Lily Evans really like? How close were Snape and the Marauders? Could any of those explosive rumors in the article be true? At first, most adults waved away the questions with warm reminiscences, fond stories of Lily's bright smile, of Snape's clever mind, and of the Marauders' endless pranks. But the level of detail in the report, coupled with its bold assertions, made simple denials ring hollow. Before long, Hogwarts, the Order of the Phoenix, the Ministry of Magic, and even the Daily Prophet all issued official statements attempting to put the matter to rest. This young woman is Lilac Evans, they declared. She is merely Lily Potter's younger sister. The resemblance is family. Her association with Professor Snape is strictly professional. She has accepted the newly established post of Assistant Potions Master at Hogwarts. That role has existed for some time and has always been open to qualified candidates. Yet few found these explanations convincing. After all, Hogwarts had never before appointed an Assistant Potions Master, and the timing of the announcement seemed too convenient. To the skeptical majority, the very need for such a position, created, it appeared, for Miss Evans, only underscored the likelihood that there was more to Lily and Snape's past than anyone wanted to admit. And so the whispers continued. Perhaps Lily had deserved better than James Potter all along. The new Defense Against the Dark Arts post came with an unexpected perk. The teaching assistant's chair was traditionally reserved for the professor's romantic partner. So when Professor Tom Riddle, a name no one predicted, took over the Defense Against the Dark Arts classroom, Remus Lupin, his assistant, suddenly found himself at the center of messy gossip. Whispers turned into full-blown rumors, especially after a mysterious author published a sentimental fanfic pairing Dumbledore, Riddle, and Lupin in a tangled love triangle. The scandal forced Nymphadora Tonks to go public, first in the morning papers, then on live television, to set the record straight about her relationship with Lupin. Even so, the whole affair rippled through Hogwarts and beyond. Meanwhile, one of the unexpected casualties was Harry's aunt. Ordinarily, she strolled in and out of Harry's dormitory whenever she pleased. Now, for reasons no one would explain, she was strictly forbidden. Harry found it odd enough that she'd stopped dropping by. Stranger still, she no longer slept in the little second-floor room the school had specially converted for her. That room adjoined Professor McGonagall's office and shared a corridor with Mei Ling's quarters, so its vacancy struck Harry as nearly impossible. And yet, day after day, the door remained firmly closed. During these past days, between planning lessons, cooking Harry's breakfast, and seeing to him, she devoted every spare moment to Mei Ling. But lately, each evening she vanished without explanation. No one knew where she went, except the professors, who seemed inexplicably well informed. When Harry pressed them for answers, Dumbledore offered only an enigmatic smile, and Snape, normally so grim, wore an unusually warm expression. Harry put two and two together. His mother was sneaking off with someone else. While he stewed over this unsettling thought, a very different conversation was unfolding in Dumbledore's office at Hogwarts. "Miss Potter, do not forget whose name you're using." Professor McGonagall's voice was sharp as ice. "My informants have tracked you to Spider's End Alley, specifically Snotlout's scrapyard, night after night, only to return at dawn." Sirius Black trembled with barely contained rage. Remus Lupin, ever vigilant, gripped Sirius's shoulder to steady him. Had Lupin's hold slipped, Sirius's animagus instincts might have sent him barreling out as a snarling dog. "Enough!" Severus Snape. His cold voice cut through the tension. He stepped directly in front of Lily, his dark eyes flashing. "Lily Potter, Potter by name, Snape by marriage, has every right to go where she pleases. Cease these baseless accusations at once." The room fell silent, the two camps locked in a standoff that threatened to burst into chaos at any moment. Yet Snape's defiance made it clear he would protect Lily's freedom, no matter the cost. Professor Dumbledore rose from his chair, blue eyes sweeping across the hushed assembly with a calm but unmistakable authority. Moments earlier, he'd been contentedly watching a Muggle film. Now the air tasted of gunpowder, and he knew he had to intervene. "Sirius, quiet!" Dumbledore commanded. The room fell silent at once. He turned to Arthur Weasley, who was hovering awkwardly in a corner. "Arthur, you have everything prepared?" Arthur hurried forward, worry creasing his brow. "Yes, Professor. I've coordinated Lilac Evans's Muggle schooling, her living arrangements, even her work experience with the Ministry of Magic's liaison office." "Excellent." Dumbledore's gaze shifted to Sirius Black. "And you?" Sirius leaned against a nearby table, a wicked grin playing on his lips. "Of course I'm ready. I've enlisted Severus Snape's help, and even that Snotlout fellow." He paused when Dumbledore raised an eyebrow. "What can I say? I'd prefer she go by Evans rather than Potter." He passed Dumbledore a parchment. Rita Skeeter whipped up this article overnight, using Arthur's notes word for word. "I want everyone to see it exactly as written. After all, my godson doesn't need another ill-judged mother figure." Dumbledore unfolded the parchment and skimmed its opening lines. Then he looked up, his expression firm. "Sirius, that portrayal is neither fair nor appropriate." Sirius merely shrugged. "Well, you did ask for everyone's input." With that, the two old friends faced off, one urging decorum, the other coyly poking at boundaries, all under the watchful eyes of the gathered witches and wizards. "Lily Potter is dead. Let her stay that way. Tomorrow's dinner better feature Lily Evans, not Lily Potter." Albus Dumbledore leaned back in his armchair, his eyes dancing with amusement. "I must admit, Rita's latest chapter is superb," he said, glancing at the pile of parchment on his desk. "She's always portrayed me as a stiff, humorless old fool, but this is brilliantly absurd and utterly convincing." With a flick of his wand, the parchment fluttered off the desk and drifted toward Lily. Severus Snape sprang forward, intercepting it before it could reach her. He held it close, his hooked nose nearly grazing the words as he began to read aloud. Before Snape could finish, Sirius Black opened his mouth, no doubt to bellow a comment, but Snape lifted his head and fixed Lily with a steady gaze. "Lily, the chapter looks fine as it stands. Take another look for yourself. But if you'd rather not, no one here will force you." Lily twirled a strand of her dark hair around her fingertip and met Snape's eyes with calm resolve. "All right, I'll read it. Actually, the rumors circulating lately have sparked all sorts of ideas in my head. Professor Dumbledore," she continued, turning toward the headmaster, "may I share some thoughts of my own?" Her green eyes were as serene and deep as a still lake, a quiet strength that made Dumbledore pause. He offered her a warm smile. "By all means, Lily, we're eager to hear what you have to say. I just hope you'll think twice before you act." Severus Snape stepped between Sirius and Lupin, his voice low but firm. "All right, enough. It's late. Can we go now?" "Go?" Sirius sneered, straining toward Snape as if to punch him. Lupin caught his arm, holding him back, but Sirius choked out, "Don't forget, you being with Lily is our gift. James deserves so much more than you, a backstabbing snake running off with everyone." Snape's dark eyes flashed. "How dare you?" he snarled, drawing his wand. A jet of emerald light shot toward Sirius, but Lily's hand shot out, clamping over Snen, apes, diverting the spell, just missing its mark. Albus Dumbledore rose slowly from his chair at the edge of the room. He gave a slight nod. There was nothing left to discuss, and the two sides seemed set on their positions. He simply watched, his eyes kind but expectant. Snape wrenched his arm free and leveled his wand at Sirius again. "Why do you think I indulge your presence?" he demanded, voice trembling with barely contained rage. "If it weren't for Harry Potter, I wouldn't waste a second on you. Remember who you are, Lily Evans, and where your loyalties lie." Lily stood between them, her hand still against Snape's. Her eyes met his, steady, unafraid. Behind her, Lupin's grip relaxed on Sirius's arm. The tension in the room crackled like a storm about to break, and for a heartbeat, no one moved, each waiting to see whose resolve would finally give way. Chapter 752. "I am Lily Evans." Snape leaned forward in the dim glow of the corridor torches, his dark eyes narrowing into slits. "Then tell me, what kind of person does St. James Potter deserve?" Sirius Black tapped his fingers against his palm, counting each trait with exaggerated precision. "Someone pureblood, someone who shares his values and interests, brave enough for Gryffindor." A cruel smile curved Snape's lips. Long, black, curly hair, gray eyes. For a heartbeat, Sirius thought he saw a massive boar drifting beneath the surface of Snape's inky gaze, an untamed beast moving through still waters. His own gray eyes unfocused. "Yes, that would be perfect." Snape's voice dropped to a near whisper. "And it has to be a black, specifically a male." "Exactly," Sirius breathed, as if rousing from a dream. Heat crept up his neck, and he blinked away the daze. "Did you not see the signs? What other black was ever in Gryffindor? You're the only one worthy to match St. James." A smug light danced in Snape's eyes. Silence fell until Remus Lupin, who'd stood against the wall in quiet watchfulness, stepped forward. He slid his hand off Sirius's shoulder, voice low and trembling. "So this is why you've always hated me," he said. "Because you've loved James all along?" His words hung between them, heavy with truth left unspoken. "Does James know?" Lily asked, her eyebrow arching. She felt as if she'd suddenly discovered a new side of herself. She knew James's love for her was genuine, but it clearly didn't keep him from loving Sirius just as fiercely. "I want to say right away," Sirius began, voice steady. "This has nothing to do with me." Before he could finish, Professor Dumbledore cleared his throat, drawing every eye to the head table. On the portrait-lined walls of the drawing room, one painting stirred. Phineas Nigellus Black, famed ancestor and former headmaster, roused himself and peered over his gilded frame. "If I understand correctly," Phineas drawled, "the reason my great-great-grandson, one of the last of the Black line, has never married bears a striking resemblance to our current headmaster's own singular marital status? At last, I see why he so readily seeks unconventional companionship." A deep flush crept up Sirius's neck. He shot to his feet as though propelled by a blast of magic, chest heaving. "Enough, Phineas. As Lord Black, I decide my own marriage. Keep your tongue in check." He jabbed a finger at the portrait. "You'll regret this. In fact, why stop here? I'll tell Regulus myself. You're hardly the only great-great-grandson in this family." With a huff, the portrait of Phineas stepped out of its frame and strode away, muttering about undignified behavior as it vanished down the corridor toward 12 Grimmauld Place. A hush fell over the room, broken only by Severus Snape's cool voice from the back. "You do have a response, don't you, Sirius?" Silence answered him. It was 6 o'clock the following evening, and the 16-day Easter holiday had finally drawn to a close. After wrapping up the day's last class, students filed into the Great Hall for dinner. Even those who normally preferred to eat in their common rooms arrived. This morning, Professor Dumbledore had announced a special dinner party that evening. There was little surprise. Everyone assumed it was to honor the professor who'd passed away during the break. Still, Whispers fluttered through the hall as curious eyes turned toward the staff table. Seated between Professors Snape and McGonagall was a striking red-haired witch. Harry recognized her immediately as his Aunt Molly. Nearly every student, whether from Gryffindor, Ravenclaw, Hufflepuff, or Slytherin, stole glances in her direction. Harry felt a nudge at his side. Seamus Finnegan leaned in and whispered, "Harry, is that really your aunt?" Harry nodded. Seamus was about to ask another question when Ginny Weasley caught his arm and silently urged him to be quiet, tilting her head toward the stage. At precisely that moment, Professor Dumbledore rose. The clatter of cutlery still, lead, and robes rustled to a hush. In his familiar, mellifluous voice, he began, "As many of you know, our new professor's reputation has been besmirched by rather unpleasant rumors. Despite official statements from the Ministry of Magic and the wizarding press, skepticism remains. I ask you, then, to reserve judgment until you have heard the full story." Professor Dumbledore stepped up to the podium in the Great Hall, his kindly eyes twinkling over the sea of expectant faces. "Good morning, everyone. You may have noticed that potions isn't on today's timetable. There's a reason for that. Our teaching assistant has kindly agreed to run a supplemental potions course for those of you who didn't meet the professor's strict entry requirements for advanced potions. This is a new opportunity for you to fulfill your ambitions, whether you earned exceeds expectations or merely an acceptable on your NEWT this year. I trust you've all received your letters about purchasing the latest potions textbook." A ripple of excitement swept through the students, quickly swelling into an uproar of cheers and shouts. "I can finally be a healer. This can't be real, can it? I've always wanted to be an Auror, just like Moody. Skywalker's Alchemy Guild, here I come. Maybe we'll even meet Skywalker himself. I'd marry him, man or woman, I don't care." From Ravenclaw's long table, Kate nudged her friend Ryan, grinning. "Did you hear that? Angelina from Gryffindor wants to marry you. Remember how thrilled you were when I gave her that shadow charm?" "Shut up," Ryan muttered, rolling his eyes. Dumbledore waited patiently as the laughter and chatter died down. When he spoke again, his voice was warm but clear. "Yes, you heard correctly. Classes will resume tomorrow with our new potions schedule. I look forward to seeing what you all accomplish. Later this term, you'll have the chance to enroll in advanced potions," Professor Dumbledore announced, his twinkling eyes sweeping over the assembled students. "And I'm delighted to tell you that Lilac Evans," he nodded toward the young witch with flaming red hair standing beside Professor Snape, "will be serving as the assistant instructor alongside Professor Snape himself. Now, Professor Snape will introduce himself in just a moment, and after that, I believe you'll be eager to have your questions answered regarding our newest staff member." A roar of approval broke out among the students. Many were not only excited by the prospect of the advanced potions class, but also curious to learn more about Lilac Evans. With a barely perceptible gesture, Snape sent a parchment fluttering onto the lectern before Lilac. Heart-pounding, she smoothed her robes, tucked a loose curl behind her ear, and lifted her head. "Good evening," she began, voice steady, although her cheeks were warmed by the spotlight. "My name is Lilac Evans, and I know there's been a great deal of speculation about who I am. If you read this morning's Daily Prophet, you'll have learned that I attended Bousfield Primary School, quite separate from Fox Primary, where my sister, Lily Evans, was a student. When I first received my Hogwarts letter, I made the difficult choice to decline my place." Lilac paused, letting her words settle over the room. She met her fellow students' curious gazes, then continued. "But circumstances changed, and I soon realized there was no substitute for a magical education. I'm honored to be here at Hogwarts, and I look forward to guiding you through the wonders and challenges of advanced potions alongside Professor Snape." A fresh wave of applause swept the great hall, mingled with relieved murmurs and excited whispers. Lilac offered a small, grateful smile, then took her seat beside the unflappable Professor Snape, ready to embark on her first year of teaching at Hogwarts. My parents were already aware of how dangerous the magical world had become. The Dark Lord's influence was spreading, and they feared for Lily's safety. In their eyes, her life was in constant jeopardy. They couldn't bear the thought, losing another child, especially since I could so easily be mistaken for her. After we sent our reply to Hogwarts, Professor Dumbledore himself came to our home. He told me that, to keep me from losing my magical education, I would have to suppress my powers and become an obscurus. He offered Muggle-born families only one grim alternative, to forgo the school entirely and teach their children at home. Lily paused, her voice faltering, as memories of her parents' gentle faces flickered through her mind. For a moment she felt as if they stood beside her, whispering from beyond, "Don't worry, Lily. Do what you think is right." When she looked up, Severus's pale, sallow face hovered in her vision. "I'm not asking you to acknowledge that woman as the child's mother," he said softly. Back in the present, the room was deathly silent except for the anxious eyes of Snape and the other professors trained on her. Lily drew a steadying breath. I was just reading from the script," she stammered. Then, lifting her head, she met their gazes with quiet resolve. "But the truth is, I am Lily Evans." Chapter 281, The Culprit. A ripple of astonishment ran through the great hall the moment Lily's words hung in the air. Students rose from their benches, craning their necks to stare at her. At the staff table, every professor except Dumbledore wore an expression of pure shock. Snape nearly overturned his chair as he sprang to his feet, anger and disbelief contending on his face. "Lily!" Harry found himself engulfed by a swarm of inquisitive classmates. Ron and Hermione tried in vain to hold them back. So Eyes of the Future was telling the truth. "Harry, you lied to us. Why didn't you say she was your mother? Is it true she married Snape?" Lily raised a hand, and a charged hush fell over the hall. Her voice was steady but carried a weight that silenced even the most frantic whisper. 12 years ago, I did not die. Severus rescued me after that fateful night and placed me in a deep, restorative sleep. For years, he administered potion after potion in the hope of bringing me back. You know what happened next. Just recently, on April 4th, I finally awoke from that long slumber. Professor Dumbledore and the others advised me to assume a new identity, one more fitting for James and better suited to a fresh start. That is why I concealed my true self from Harry, posing as his aunt so I could watch over him. A stunned silence met her confession, as everyone struggled to absorb the revelations Lily had just laid bare. Ryan shifted in his seat, watching Lily Evans deliver her speech on stage. Only recently had he seen the Eyes of the Future report, and it had made him wonder if he could at last admit his true identity without fear. Beside him, Kate rolled her eyes. "Like Zhang Wuji's mother always says," she muttered, "the prettier the woman, the bigger the liar." Ryan frowned. If he hadn't known Lily so well, he might have believed it. "Pretty?" he scoffed. "Let's tally it up, shall we? Molly Weasley fooled 11 people, Narcissa Malfoy 14, and Lily Evans 20. And you think that's impressive?" He shot Kate a teasing glance. Kate flipped open a little notebook and pretended to check a list. "Why so bitter? Aren't they all you in disguise?" She tapped her pen against her lips. "Besides, you keep talking about Zhang Wuji. Why don't you actually know who he is?" Ryan shrugged. "Who? Zhang Wuji?" He shook his head. "He's the hero of that old wuxia novel, The Heaven Sword and Dragon Saber, serialized back in the 60s in Ming Pao. Those muggles really had wild imaginations, spinning the sky, flipping the earth, mastering any martial skill at a glance. Wouldn't that be amazing?" Kate's eyes gleamed with pride. Learning Chinese had been a detour. They'd both originally aimed for Japanese, but now she was making real progress. She leaned closer and whispered, "Do you think any of it could be real?" Ryan laughed softly, though the question hung between them like a spell. In that moment, magic didn't feel so impossible after all. "It's a monumental shift in the balance of the universe," one student declared. "Don't sweat the details," another retorted. "I'm serious, Ryan. Aren't you dying to know how Kate ended up with that little notebook?" Penelope cleared her throat, determined to hijack the conversation. "Actually," she added with a sly grin, "I'd much rather hear what Harry thinks." And with that, dinner broke up amid laughter and lingering questions. Yet the chatter didn't end there. A small cluster of girls gathered on the lawn just beyond the dining hall, voices rising in excited speculation. "Professor Snape is so romantic. No wonder he's always in such a foul mood. Look at his greasy hair and that pale complexion. It all makes sense if he's been brewing love potions at midnight. I swear, I believe in true love again." Harry Potter sat a few yards away, cross-legged on the grass, his expression as still as stone. Thanks to his uncanny hearing, every enthusiastic whisper reached him clearly. But he felt no anger, just a familiar wry acceptance. After all, in recent weeks, Snape's reputation among the students had taken a surprising turn. Even word of his secret service with the Order of the Phoenix had leaked. Yet despite the unexpected heroism attached to his name, his barbed tongue and relentless pressure cooker teaching style remained as notorious as ever. To the students, he was now two things at once, the same scowling professor they loved to hate, and, incongruously, a dark knight in a cloak. Harry clenched his fists as yet another whisper reached his ears. Snape's every fault was forgiven the moment he rescued Lily Evans. His mother, his childhood sweetheart, had been taken and then returned, and now everyone was treating Severus Snape like a hero. Harry had slipped out of the castle to escape those very rumors, only to come back and find them spreading through every corridor. Ginny hurried up beside him. "What's wrong, Harry? Still thinking about it?" She must have seen the same frustration in his eyes. He sank down on a stone bench. "I just don't understand Mum's reasoning," he admitted. "If she really wants to be with Professor Snape, why give up being Lily Evans? Dumbledore and the Ministry have backed that identity, given it their full support and credibility. Why trade that for this?" Ginny paused, then offered a small shrug. Maybe she never meant to lie. Remember that Eye of the Future expose? It gave her the perfect alibi. Now, everyone believes she really is Lily Evans, and that she had a good reason for changing her story. Maybe that's all she needed, a cover that people would accept without question. Harry frowned. He still wasn't convinced, but for now, Ginny's words were the only explanation he'd found. Together, they stood and made their way back inside, the hum of gossip following them through the castle's ancient stone halls. "Maybe it's best to just go with the flow," Harry muttered, staring at the headline. "Eye of the Future," he read aloud with a bitter edge in his voice. Then, abruptly, he looked up at Ginny. "Did you speak with Colin about that photo?" Ginny met his gaze steadily. "Yes. The moment I saw the report from Eye of the Future, I knew exactly which picture they'd used, even though it was cropped. The background matched our old meeting room in the clubhouse, and Colin was the one hoisting a camera when it was taken." Harry shook his head. "I can't believe he'd hand it over to them." "I don't either," Ginny replied. "Colin told me he destroyed the original print and every digital copy with a cutting charm, then tossed the fragments into the trash can. At that time, only Dudley, Colin, and I were left in the Harry Potter Club. Everyone else had drifted away. He suspected an anti-fan had sneaked in to dig up dirt on you, so he wanted to eliminate the evidence once and for all. But somehow someone recovered the pieces, reassembled them, and sent the image to Eye of the Future." Harry ran a hand through his hair. "A cutting charm? In the trash can?" He sounded more bewildered than angry. "How on earth did anyone manage to restore it after that? Isn't it obvious that the things being destroyed are the important ones?" "This is our club's tradition," said the student with a grin. "We cast a cutting charm on whatever we want to discard, shred it to bits, and then toss it into the bin. It's fun. Plus, after we leave, the house elves come in and clean up the mess." Harry froze. "Wait, what did you just say?" His mind raced. "I thought this was our club." "Next line," the student interrupted. Harry swallowed. "After we leave, the house elves clean up all the rubbish?" The student nodded, leaning back. "Exactly. You, the great Harry Potter, understand the tireless work of humble house elves, yes?" At the mention of house elves, Harry's eyes snapped open. "Dobby!" he shouted, waving his wand. With a crack, Dobby appeared at Harry's side, tears glistening in his wide eyes. "Does Harry Potter need Dobby's help?" he sobbed. Ignoring Dobby's distress, Harry turned back to the others, his voice ringing out. "Now I see it all. When Colin joined the Club, someone sneaked in alongside him, another wizard, hiding among us. That secret guest is the one behind these incidents." Author's note: I came down with a cold yesterday and slept most of the day. I'm feeling better now and will post the rest of the chapter soon. Sure, I'd be happy to help polish and rewrite the chapter. Could you please paste the full machine-translated text here so I can get started? Chapter 754. The sorrow of the strong Dobby's shoulders shook as he fought back the last of his tears. His eyes, round and damp like little tennis balls, blinked up at Harry in bewilderment. "Club?" he whispered. Harry let out a breath he hadn't realized he'd been holding. He crouched beside the little house elf and gently took his slender arms. "Yes, Dobby, the secret club. You know about it?" Dobby sniffled, pressing a trembling hand to his nose. "Yes, Harry Potter's dormitory and the club. Dobby is in charge of both." Harry exchanged a look with Ginny, then spoke in a low, urgent voice. "On the afternoon of April 10th, we know Colin was in that room, but was anyone else there?" Dobby's ears drooped. He hesitated, then nodded. "Dobby knows. He is a descendant of the great Hufflepuff. He always arrives first at the club, hides away in the broom closet, and he's the very last to leave." Harry's eyes widened. Ginny leaned forward. Together they said the name that had suddenly clicked into place. Zacharias Smith. Yes, Dobby's relief was palpable. It's him, Zacharias Smith. But why does he lurk in that closet? Why does he rummage through the wastebaskets? He shook his head, perplexed. Dobby cannot understand it. Harry frowned, pondering Smith's odd behavior. Then, almost in a whisper, he added, "Dudley?" Ginny's brow furrowed. "Dudley? How could Dudley be involved?" Harry didn't meet her eyes. Instead, his attention returned to Dobby. "Tell us everything you saw, Dobby. We need every detail." "Did Dobby help you, Harry Potter?" "A great deal." "That's wonderful. Harry Potter is always welcome to call on Dobby, whenever." Dobby beamed proudly, then hesitated, his large ears drooping for a moment. With a soft crackle, he snapped his fingers and vanished into thin air. Harry turned to Ginny, his expression unreadable. "Tell me, what would everyone think the relationship is between Dudley and me?" Ginny blinked. "You mean?" Harry nodded. "Think about it. Dudley's always so congenial around me. Mocking, sure, but friendly-looking. Anyone watching would assume we get along. Yet everyone also knows how close he and Zacharias are. Every time Zacharias spreads another smear about me, Dudley leaps to defend him. He despises me just as much as his friend does." Ginny opened her mouth, then closed it. "Harry, you don't have to deal with this on your own. Just tell the others in the club what Zacharias is up to. They'll—" Harry waved her off, his hands still unconsciously tracing the runes carved into his wand. "No, this isn't their fight. It's mine." He spoke quietly but with firm resolve. "I want my own revenge." Ginny's eyes widened. "Why? We could alert the club, make sure everyone knows how he's been sneaking around. We'd all stand by you." He shook his head. "I appreciate it, Ginny, but I need to do this myself." He paused. "Let everyone else stay out of it." Ginny hesitated, the wound of her concern plain on her face, but she stayed silent, knowing better than to argue when Harry had made up his mind. "Everyone in this club has a stake in what's happening," Ginny said, her shoulders stiff as she stood in the common room. Across the castle, in the room of requirement, Kate turned to Penelope with a triumphant grin. "I won our bet. Harry Potter uncovered the culprit in under a week," Kate announced. Penelope huffed in mock outrage. "Fine, whatever, but that means Ryan is mine for the next 7 days." Ryan, it turned out, could project himself to multiple places at once, a neat trick that would let him slip away from Kate and spend quality time with Penelope. Kate reached over and ruffled his hair. "Did you hear that, Munchkin?" she teased. Ryan only nodded, his brow furrowed. "Yeah, but have you managed to master that sacrificial magic yet?" Kate blinked, confused. "What does sacrificial magic have to do with?" "Nothing," Ryan said, and fell silent. In truth, his question went right to the heart of a recent breakthrough. He'd reached level 6 in body transfiguration. His flesh had become a fortress, very muscle and cell-tempered by enchantment. And with it, even the most fundamental power of all had grown exponentially. His ability to create life, his very generative force, had become so potent it threatened to blur the line between living and non-living matter. After all, if Hagrid could forge a living being like Hephaestus by sacrificing part of his own magic, Ryan's transformation was nothing short of the same kind of miracle, only more profound. He let his silence hang in the air. Unaware of the true scope of his power, Kate and Penelope returned to their chatter, and the meeting in the room of requirement carried on as if nothing extraordinary had just slipped between them. Ryan's power had grown beyond anything the magical world had ever seen. With nothing more than his own bone blood, an ancient, living essence coursing through his bones, he could impregnate any element, any concept, with a pure, divine spirit. Flames took on the consciousness of fire itself. Towering mountains rumbled with the heartbeat of the earth. Rivers murmured the wisdom of flowing water. Even the wind carried thoughts of freedom and change. So long as an entity possessed a clear identity, Ryan could breathe life into it. He dreamed bigger still. By scattering his bone blood across heaven and earth, he could fulfill the Shinto promise of 8 million gods. Every rock, every gust of wind, every flicker of flame would become a deity. The magical world, already home to centaurs and merfolk, would teem with new half-human beings, divine progeny born of the earth's own will. In villages and cities, humans might awaken to inexplicable virgin births, mirroring ancient myths. In Ryan's vision, the very ground beneath their feet would pulse with godhood, and the world would bow to a living pantheon of his creation. But with this burgeoning power came an even more terrifying gift: true foresight. Ryan's mind reached far into the future, mapping every possibility with uncanny clarity. He saw that Hogwarts itself, its professors, its students, its hallowed halls, would become unwitting vessels of his divine inspiration. Each spell learned, each lecture attended, would draw them deeper into his grand design. In that long-foreseen dawn, the castle's defenders would awaken to a revelation. They were not merely learning magic, but were being conceived by a power greater than any witch or wizard. And at the center of it all stood Ryan, orchestrating the world's rebirth, his bone blood the spark from which a new age of gods would rise. Ryan sat hunched over his workbench, beads of sweat tracing cold lines down his temples. He'd made his choice, to sever ties with this world line and keep to himself, but a new problem had come to light. How could he ever be intimate with a woman when his fertility was so overwhelmingly powerful? He tapped the rim of a crystal flask, watching the faint glow of the alchemical runes he'd just etched into its surface. Thanks to his mastery of alchemy, he'd devised a permanent glyph array that could transform a portion of his bone blood into a sedative elixir. In theory, the potion would blunt nearly all of his fertility, but not quite all. With the right conditions, a single encounter could still result in pregnancy. Only those who'd already taken the elixir regularly, like Kate, had developed some resistance. But even her tolerance wouldn't hold up against too many frequent encounters. If they allowed things to proceed unchecked over the course of a week, Kate would almost certainly conceive. He needed a failsafe, a secondary, feeding magic, woven into the potion that would suppress fertility activity entirely, something subtle enough not to interfere with her normal health. "All right," Kate said, breaking into his thoughts. She stood by the table, arms crossed. When Ryan barely looked up, she sighed and nodded determinedly. "I'll practice with it." Ryan straightened, forced himself to meet her eyes. "This is vital if you don't want to become a mother," he said quietly. Kate's eyes widened for a moment, but she quickly relaxed. So what's the big deal? I can just keep taking the potion orally, right?" He shook his head. "It's not about the entry point. My bone blood can integrate with flesh at a structural level. Unless the magical feeding array is in place, the potion alone won't stop conception." Kate frowned, processing the warning. Then she lifted her chin. "Fine. Show me exactly how to use it." Ryan exhaled, relief mixing with resolve. He reached for a vial of the faintly shimmering elixir and began to explain the intricate steps she would need to follow, each one crucial to keeping her fully protected. In that moment, both of them understood. There was no room for mistakes. Their freedom, their future, depended on absolute precision. Only feeding magic can break it down completely. Ryan sighed inwardly. Nagini was perfect in every way, except when it came to learning spells. She was so slow that he hadn't even touched her in almost a month. And then there was Helena. Though she existed as a ghost, pregnancy hadn't posed any obstacle. If anything, her half-ethereal form only accelerated her transformation back toward the living. Caught between spirit and flesh, her body instinctively yearned for life, a drive she could not suppress. Lately, his lessons with Helena had blurred professional courtesy and personal feeling. But the real challenge was figuring out how a ghost could master sacrificial magic in the first place. The ritual demanded the spark of Gublai's fairy fire, and if that fire had itself slipped into the realm of ghosts, everything went haywire. Helena had every right to feel cheated. She'd fallen headlong for another scoundrel, one who'd pilfered both her heart and her body. Even the tragic Do-E had never been wronged that badly. But how could she resist someone so eloquent, so logically persuasive, so disarmingly clever, and with such skillful hands? I suppose Helena would have fled. Is this the sorrow of the strong? Chapter 755, Punishment. Harry darted down the shadowed corridor of the dungeons, relying on the Marauder's map to guide him. Zacharias Smith, still complaining about how burdensome it was to be so powerful, didn't notice Harry skirting around a corner until it was too late. With a sudden flash of golden light and a strangled scream, Zacharias found himself suspended upside down in midair. An invisible hook gripped his ankles, hoisting him off the damp stone floor. His legs flailed, and his head bobbed perilously close to the ground as he twisted in a vain attempt to locate his attacker. "Who's there?" he barked, voice cracking. "This is right outside the Hufflepuff common room. We're united here. If you hurt me, my entire house will come after you. I'm a proud descendant of Helga Hufflepuff. And if Professor Snape happens along, your secret's blown. You're attacking me from behind like a coward." He reached for his wand, but the invisible constraints tightened, pinning his wrist and silencing any spell he might cast. His words died on his lips. Harry stepped into view, wand steady and expression cold. No one at Hogwarts could bully a Hufflepuff, or anyone else, without facing consequences. And right now, Zacharias Smith was about to learn exactly what those consequences looked like. Harry didn't utter a word. He simply raised his wand and cast a silent, disarming charm. A vivid scarlet jet of light shot from its tip, striking Zacharias's wand and sending it spinning end over end before it clattered against the stone floor. For a moment, the corridor fell utterly still. The students who had been milling about seemed to vanish, their voices cut off, their gazes averted, as if this stretch of castle had been forgotten. Zacharias stood frozen, panic and confusion wrestling on his face. He'd spoken loudly, yet no one had answered him. Had his resistance somehow enraged the stranger who'd just disarmed him? Humiliation flared into anger. Clenching his fists, he spat out, "You've gone way too far. I'll have my family investigate this disgrace, and yours too. You'll learn just how much clout Hufflepuff wields in the British wizarding world. If you dropped me to my knees and begged for mercy, maybe I'd let you live. But you're nothing but a coward, sneaking up behind people like this. You spineless." He trailed off, sputtering more curses that echoed off the stone walls. Harry, still silent, tapped the side of his wand in a practiced motion. A whisper-quiet cleaning charm washed over the air, and every venomous insult dissolved as though it had never been spoken. Harry slipped his wand back into his cloak pocket. No further words were needed. The stunned Slytherin could only gape in silence as the corridor's bustle slowly resumed around them. Pink foam gushed from Zacharias's mouth, coating his lips and throat, making him choke and retch. He wanted to scream for help, anyone. But the only sound in the narrow corridor was the relentless thud of approaching footsteps, each one marking off the seconds until his end. He struggled, spitting out soapy water, but no rescue came. Then, just when he feared he would pass out, a gentle coolness swept across his stomach. He drew in a breath and discovered he could breathe again. Deep, steady inhalations filled his lungs. It felt exquisite, as peaceful and protected as if he'd slipped back into his mother's womb. He drifted in that calm for a long moment, forgetting where he was and why he was terrified. Suddenly, the memory of the mysterious figure behind him snapped into focus. His heart raced anew. With great effort, he pulled himself upright and forced his trembling lips into a semblance of a smile. Hello," he croaked. "What should I call you? Great sir? Sir Knight? Master? Darling?" He paused, throat tight, waiting for some sign of recognition from the silent stranger. He forced a shaky smile. "I don't understand how someone like me, so lowly, barely worth a glance, could have offended you. Please tell me what I did wrong. I'll change anything, do whatever it takes. Just say the word." A flash of blue light split the air. "Don't!" Zacharias cried out, arms and legs flailing as he involuntarily lifted off the ground. Seconds later, he landed as suddenly as he'd risen, unhurt but trembling against the cold stone wall. On the opposite side, a new line of glowing text had appeared. "Why did you steal the club's information?" Disoriented by the odd angle and the pounding in his head, Zacharias blinked hard to focus. When the words finally registered, realization hit him like a curse. He drew a trembling breath and confessed, "So you're from that club too?" I hate Colin. He's a muggle-born wizard, yet he managed to found this enormous organization, and the professors approved it too. My own Hufflepuff Research Club applied over and over, but we never even got a reply. I was jealous. I thought if I compromised his records, I could force him to admit he'd betrayed the great Harry Potter and make him resign. Another streak of blue light flickered in the gloom, but this time Zacharias stayed silent. He pressed his back to the wall and waited, having finally uttered the words he'd chosen. For once, no one had a bad thing to say about his supposed hero, Harry Potter. Zacharias even managed to offer praise, despite the churning in his stomach. But he was wrong. The only thing that had changed since his last glance at the wall was the new message scrawled in crimson. "You're lying." "I'm not," Zacharias protested, but the hard press of a wand against his side stole the fight from his voice. He gulped, then babbled. Okay, I'll tell the truth. I hate Harry Potter. He and that Dudley have spent the whole day picking on me. First up is Harry. He stole my spotlight, cheated, and cost me my status as a champion. And then there's Dudley, Harry's muggle-born cousin, who's been bossing me around on Harry's orders, even stripping Smith of his role as Hufflepuff captain. If it couldn't be me, it should have been Diggory. At least his family has a Hufflepuff Minister of Magic. He broke off, suddenly aware of how shrill he sounded. The wand's tip dug in again. Zacharias's voice dropped to a trembling, sugary whisper. "You still there? This time I swear I'm not lying. I lost my temper. Hanging upside down for too long does funny things to your head." Zacharias's voice rang out across the empty chamber. "I never actually took that photograph. Colin did. You'll have to find him yourself. I only happened upon him secretly destroying the body, and out of curiosity, I restored it." He paused, hands darting to his waist. His wand was gone. A ripple of panic chased away his bravado. Clearing his throat, he forced himself on. "Look, I gave both the photo and the story to the Eye of the Future purely for profit. Honestly, that rag is as disreputable as the old Quibbler. Hardly anyone would have believed them, even if they'd printed it. This time, though, things exploded because Mrs. Potter herself admitted who she was. Inadvertently, I did her a favor. I primed the public for her revelation and even smoothed over her ties with Professor Snape in advance. Without me, none of this chaos would have happened. Right, sir?" His heart hammered. The faint sound of breathing behind him, something he'd barely registered, had suddenly gone silent. "Sir?" Zacharias's voice cracked. "Are you still there? If you're planning to leave, at least untie me. My robes are slipping, and I'm half exposed here. Hello, someone, please, help me." Chapter 756. Sleeping Zacharias Neville's eyes went wide from his corner of the Gryffindor common room. So the culprit behind all this was Zacharias? Draco, who hadn't joined their company in ages, practically sparkled with excitement. "He's down in the cellars? Brilliant! I can't wait to run into him when I head back." Ron stamped his foot. "That's not the point. How dare he claim he'd be a warrior without Harry's help? As if it were that simple. In first year, did he ever earn a professorship? Harry did. It's preposterous. My Harry deserves nothing but respect." Despite his indignation, Ron's chest swelled with pride. Harry's victories felt like his own. Ginny stepped forward, a teasing glint in her eye. "Excuse me, I think I'm the one who should be proud here." Before she could turn away, Harry slipped an arm around her shoulders. "Ron's my brother. Let him boast." Ginny squirmed for a moment and then relaxed. She'd grown accustomed to Harry's affectionate hugs by now. After all, Ron's teasing sprang from genuine brotherly love, never anything more, and his devotion to Lavender was every bit as sincere. Draco cut in abruptly. "By the way, did you really just leave Zacharias out there? Not that I mind, but once your protective ward falls away, won't anyone passing by spot him? He only got rescued after you pulled the spell. Seems a bit too convenient, don't you think?" Harry blinked at him in surprise. "I never withdrew the ward. It stays in place until lights out. After that, it's up to Filch whether anyone notices." He smiled with relief and completely overlooked his mistake. He'd forgotten the castle's ancient cellars, the realm of the Snake King. Worse, Severus Snape's current body was a divine construct, one that carried its own arcane safeguards. Meanwhile, Down in the dungeons, Ryan was fretting over how best to introduce Helena to the discipline of fasting magic and to unravel the true origin of the ghostly divination firefly she had summoned. "Hold it, Lily," Snape suddenly hissed as they neared his office. He paused mid-step, nostrils flaring. "I'm detecting unauthorized magic. Someone's up to no good." They turned down the shadowed corridor beside the Hufflepuff common room, torches flickering along the damp stone walls. Then Snape halted altogether, his dark eyes widening. There, suspended upside down from a hidden iron hook, was a boy whose embarrassingly darkened underwear betrayed more than a simple rule breach. And next to him stood Lily, cheeks flushed, and struggling to hide the triumphant smirk curling at the corner of her lips. Severus couldn't help but feel the sting of a memory more painful than any he'd known, except Lily's death. Her smile vanished the moment it surfaced. During the resurrection ritual, she'd been haunted by the image of their breakup. Severus suspended upside down by magic, his robes twisting to reveal dark undergarments, and her own fury softening into the barest hint of a smirk. He must have seen it too. Perhaps that fleeting expression was what drove her to hiss out the word mudblood. Remorse flared across her face. Shaking himself free of the past, Snape focused on the boy still hovering in midair. "His legs aren't emaciated or deathly pale," he murmured. "There's hair on them, and his undergarments aren't dingy. It's simply poor lighting that makes them look dark." He raised his wand, and, with a subtle flick, caused the small golden bell, once clasped in the boy's hand, to slip free and drop silently to the floor. A brilliant flash of light, and the boy began to plummet. Snape's wand trembled. A second precise motion reversed the descent, and the boy spun upright, descending gently until his feet touched the ground. Lily stepped forward, voice trembling. "Are you all right?" Concern shone in her eyes as she reached toward him. Professor Snape stepped in front of Lily, blocking her path to the unconscious boy. "Zachary Smith, is it?" "A troublesome child," he murmured, his dark eyes narrowing. With a flick of his wand, he drew in the swirling residue of magic around the boy. "He's under a powerful slumber enchantment, deep, ancient magic that's nearly invisible to standard detection. Its signature matches lore surrounding the third incarnation of Vishnu. Something is very wrong." He traced the magical scent down the stony corridor until he stood before a large painting, a gleaming silver bowl overflowing with fruit. Lily frowned. "A fruit bowl? You're telling me that's the source of his lethargy?" "It's no ordinary kitchen artifact," Snape replied. "This piece is linked to the relics of the Big Four, not house elves or culinary mischief." He tapped the heel of his wand on the floor. Instantly, a translucent platform formed beneath Zacharias's still body, lifting him as if on an invisible stretcher. "Stay close," Snape said to Lily, his voice calm but urgent. "I intend to unravel this curse at its origin." With that, he advanced toward the painting, the floating form of their comrade following obediently behind. "Whenever we want to eat together at night, we come here," Lily announced, stepping forward to the enchanted portrait on the wall. She reached out and tapped the oversized green pear nestled in a silver fruit bowl. To everyone's astonishment, the pear trembled, emitted a high-pitched giggle, and instantly transformed into a smooth, jade-green doorknob. C surveyed the commotion, the house elf darting frantically through the newly revealed doorway, entirely unaware of its own mishap, and the golden goblet on the shelf, shining with an unprecedented magical glow. "It looks like we're on the verge of solving this mystery," he remarked. Nep's tone was measured. "Do you think it has something to do with Hufflepuff's goblet?" Lily, back in the kitchen after her resurrection to perfect syrup fruit pie, frowned thoughtfully. "That goblet is supposed to enhance flavor. How could a charm meant to make food delicious end up casting everyone into drowsiness?" C gave a reluctant shrug. "It might be tied to that insufferable boy's ancestry. I hate to admit it, but he really is a Hufflepuff descendant. Perhaps, when he was hanging upside down in midair just now, he triggered some hidden mechanism." Lily glanced at Zacharias, who looked no more troublesome than any other child. "Annoying? He seems perfectly ordinary to me." Severus Snape snorted in disgust. "No matter how irritating James Potter can be, at least he's harmless once he's asleep. Around Hogwarts, he's notorious, always acting high and mighty because he thinks his ancestry makes him better than everyone else. He looks down on anyone who actually excels and does everything he can to discredit them. In reality, he's just mediocre. Lily Evans glanced at Snape. Wait, did you say James? Snape shrugged. That's what the elf reported. And if his report is accurate, the bugger's grades are as abysmal as his attitude. They stood in silence inside a small chamber in the castle, waiting for Dumbledore. A house elf had already alerted him to the disturbance. Snape's lips curved into a faint, almost reluctant smile as he contemplated the moment. The door swung open. Albus Dumbledore entered, his eyes twinkling behind half-moon spectacles. Severus, Lily, thank you for coming so quickly. And who is this young man? Snape stepped aside to reveal a boy slumped against the far wall, eyes closed, legs dangling in the air. Lily hurried forward. This is Zacharias Smith, she explained. He activated the golden cup we found in the closet. When the elf arrived, he was trapped upside down in a deep sleep. Dumbledore approached the boy with keen interest. Although Zacharias's breathing was calm and steady, faint currents of magic still shimmered around him, tethering him to the enchanted cup. The soft, stubborn glow pulsed like a heartbeat, proof that the artifact's power was far from spent.